I died playing Mount and Blade late at night, just dropped dead from exhaustion. Next thing I knew, I woke up in some kind of military camp, but everything was wrong. A guy with a pockmarked face was shaking me, calling me Simon. There was a blonde woman lying next to me under a linen blanket. I had no idea what was going on. Before I could even think straight, these guys dragged me out of the tent and shoved clothes on me. A messenger was waiting outside. He bowed to me and called me Sir Simon Holland. That shocked everyone, including me. Turns out, Simon's uncle, a knight named Jolin, had died protecting some marquis 3 months ago. As a reward, the king made Jolin a baron. But Jolin's only son had also died in battle recently with no children, so the title and land passed down to me. Well, to Simon, whose body I was now living in. The real Simon had also died suddenly, on top of that blonde woman, actually. But somehow I took over his body and got most of his memories. They felt hazy, like a dream I'd already started forgetting. I brought 5 guys with me, Simon's hometown friends, all free men, and we followed the messenger to a carriage outside the camp. There were about a dozen well-armed cavalrymen waiting as escort. I could tell from their gear and Simon's memories that these were elite soldiers. Once I got in the carriage and sat down on some straw, something amazing happened. A screen appeared in front of my eyes, the Mount and Blade interface, the exact save file I'd been playing when I died. I was a baron in that game too. I tested it out and found I could actually pull items from the game inventory into the real world. I took out a red apple, bit into it, sweet and real. This was incredible. I checked the character stats. They matched Simon's actual abilities, and they were pretty low. His best skill was riding at level 3, running at level 2, and resistance at level 1. Everything else was 0. His weapon skills were mediocre. Spears were his best at 49, which counted as proficient. I had 5 upgrade points available, so I immediately put 1 into Iron Bones. My whole body burned and ached for about 15 minutes, but afterward I felt genuinely stronger. Iron Bones boost strength, toughness, and healing speed. It was like having a real cheat code. I also checked my army roster. I had 5 named companions, a medic, a warrior, a trainer, a merchant, and an engineer. My troops included heavy cavalry, light cavalry, heavy and light infantry, militia, longbowmen, and militia archers. Over 100 soldiers total, but most of them were wounded. Clearly, both Simon and I had just survived some massive battle that nearly wiped us out. I decided right then, I'd accept this new life. From now on, I'm Simon. I looked at my troop roster and wondered if I could actually bring those soldiers out into the real world. That would give me my own personal army. Then I checked my gold, 6,783 dinars. I pulled one out and it appeared in my hand, real and shiny. After weighing it, I figured each dinar was worth about half a gold eagle, the local currency. So I had roughly 3,000 gold eagles. That's a fortune here. A single ox costs about 5 silver deer, and a loaf of bread is just 2 copper stars. The carriage ride took over an hour and made me nauseous. We arrived at the Marquis camp, built on a hillside with proper log fences and watchtowers. Much better than the militia camp I came from. The place stank of horse and human waste, but deeper inside it got cleaner. The Marquis tent was the biggest one, gray-white with red decorations and a double-headed eagle, the royal symbol. I went in alone. Inside sat a tough-looking middle-aged man in red armor, polishing a short sword that glowed faintly ice blue. I bowed as best I could, copying noble manners from Simon's memories. It came out pretty awkward. Marquis Val told me that my uncle Jolin had served as his personal guard for 17 years and died protecting him during the Battle of West Wind Pass. Jolin's son Sal had picked Holland as our family name before he died too. Now everything fell to me. The Marquis asked my age, 16. He handed me a sheepskin map of the region and a sealed letter, then told me to take Jolin and Sal's belongings, hire some reliable mercenaries, and go to Gold Eagle City to receive the king's official appointment. A guard led me to a gray tent nearby. Inside were 2 urns of ashes and 2 sets of battered armor, 1 plate and chain, 1 brigandine and chain. Both were smashed up and bloodstained. There was also a greatsword and a war hammer, both covered in scratches. These 2 had clearly gone down fighting hard. I found a money pouch full of gold coins and a 3-page sheepskin booklet stained with blood. The first page read, Plundering Fire Night Breathing Method. My heart jumped. This was a treasure. By kingdom law, only nobles could learn these techniques. Anyone else caught with one would be executed. I immediately stored it in my game inventory. I carried the urns and the bag out myself and asked the guard to help with the heavy armor. Outside, only my 5 hometown friends were waiting. The carriage and cavalry escort had left. I looked back at the camp and thought to myself, this is where my new life truly begins. Kings and lords, who says you have to be born into it? My pockmarked friends started calling me Master, but got shy about it. I told them we grew up together and I wouldn't forget them if I made it big. They smiled but grew more respectful. The sharp ones immediately grabbed the armor and weapons without being asked. For them, following me was a rare chance to climb the social ladder. If they got appointed as a state knight someday, they'd be nobility too. Right as we were chatting, Hilter's stomach growled loud enough for everyone to hear, and then all our bellies joined in. We hadn't eaten since the night before, and it was already noon. I led everyone toward the merchant camp west of the Marquis' grounds. It was bigger and cleaner than the military camp. No awful smell at all. Plenty of soldiers in armor were coming and going. We spotted an outdoor tavern called the Roaring Tavern. Just some tables and chairs set up on cleared ground with a wooden sign. The place was packed. Soldiers laughing and shouting everywhere. A bard singing upbeat songs. And a few big blonde guys with half-dressed women sitting on their laps, hands wandering freely. My 5 young companions couldn't stop staring. I picked a corner table and ordered big, 6 black breads, 6 roast lamb portions, 6 lamb soups, a roast chicken, berries, cheese, and butter. The waiter glanced at the fine 2-handed iron sword by our feet before smiling and taking the order. He'd been worried we couldn't pay, but that sword reassured him. The food came after about half an hour. The roast meat was great, just salt, no spices, but the natural flavor was delicious. The black bread, though, I tried a piece and nearly broke my teeth. Hard as a brick, with bits of gravel and dried grass baked in. My 5 friends devoured everything, bread and all. Growing boys eat like animals. The bill came to 3 silver sheep. I carefully pulled coins from the inherited purse, hiding it with my sleeve and placing them directly in the waiter's hand. No clinking on the table. That purse was full of gold eagles and silver deer. Flashing that kind of money in a place like this would be asking for trouble. While eating, I'd been thinking hard about my situation. I was the last living heir of the Holland family. If I died, the barony would be taken back and handed to some established noble. Plenty of people would love that outcome. That's why the Marquis told me to hire reliable mercenaries. Suddenly, a table in the middle of the tavern got flipped over. Some guys drew swords over a woman. 6 big men squaring off against each other. I didn't want any part of that. I called my guys and we grabbed our gear and left fast. Thankfully, no dramatic confrontation happened. Outside, Hilter asked if we should go back to our home village. Another one of the guys called him stupid. Obviously, we'd go to my new territory. A scantily dressed woman tried to lure us inside somewhere, and my friend's eyes went wide, but none of us had money to waste on that. I found a quiet hillside nearby, sat on a flat rock, and pretended to dig through the cloth bag while actually pulling the sheepskin map from my game inventory. It showed the land of Shisai in clear detail, something the original Simon had never seen before. My friends crowded around to look, but none of them could make much sense of it. They were all practically illiterate. I asked if anyone had heard of the land of Shisai. They argued among themselves, but couldn't agree on anything useful. Then a sweet, charming voice spoke up behind us. "Excuse me, do you know where I can find Lord Simon?" A girl in a brown dress showed up asking for me. She said her name was Millen and that her older sister was the late Sal's fiancée. She wasn't nobility. Her father was a merchant. I wondered why Sal would have gotten engaged to a merchant's daughter, but I agreed to meet the father. Their group wasn't far away. They had about a dozen mounted guards in good armor, chain mail with brigandine on top, carrying cavalry lances. These guys looked almost as good as elite soldiers. The father, Claire, was a big, strong man. He introduced himself as the owner of the Windroom Trading Company and the War Spear Mercenary Band. Behind him stood a woman in an elegant brown robe with a hood, tall, pale-skinned, with an incredible figure. That had to be the fiancée. Claire got straight to the point. He wanted me to take Sal's place and marry his daughter Winnie's. He handed me a marriage contract on sheepskin. I kept my face calm and told him the marriage agreement died with Sal. There's no law in the Eagle Kingdom that says you inherit someone's engagement. But Claire pushed back politely. He said I didn't understand my situation, that I was in real danger. If something happened to me, the barony would be taken back by the crown, and plenty of southern nobles were hungry for that land like vampires craving blood. That got my attention. I opened the map and asked him to tell me about Valor territory. Looking at the map, my territory was huge, over 1,000 square kilometers, way bigger than a normal barony. But Kalair explained there was a catch. The entire Shisai region was newly conquered land. There were no castles, no development, just wilderness. All of it needed to be built from scratch. He laid out the costs. A decent serf costs 5 to 8 silver deer. Oxen cost 5 silver deer each. Iron hose cost a silver sheep or 2. And building even a small castle would run at least 3,000 gold eagles. My territory was enormous but completely empty. Then it clicked. Sal wasn't stupid. Our family had no connections, no background, and was down to just one heir. Marrying into higher nobility would risk getting swallowed up. A rich merchant's daughter was actually the smartest move. Get the money, develop the land, grow the family, and worry about political marriages later. I asked Kalair directly what he'd give me. He offered 3,000 gold eagles, plus a 100-man slave soldier unit, 50 light infantry, 20 spearmen, and 30 archers, all equipped at his expense. He'd also personally escort me to Eagle City with his mercenary band. I thought 100 soldiers sounded small for something he called a legion, but for a baron with nothing, it was actually significant. I told him I'd think about it and give my answer by evening. He immediately raised the offer to 4,000 gold eagles. I could tell he thought I was tougher to deal with than he expected. He said himself that hardly any baron in all of Shisai could get that kind of support. After Kalair left, I told Hilter and the others I was going to take a piss and walked into the nearby woods alone. Once I was sure nobody was around, I tried pulling soldiers out of my troop roster. It actually worked. A ripple appeared in the air a few meters away, and out dropped a big man in heavy scale armor carrying a two-handed sword. He stumbled, stabbed his sword into the ground, and knelt. Not out of respect, just dizziness. After a few seconds he recovered, looked at me, and called out, "My Lord Baron." It was Ailey, my top knight from the game. He looked about 70 to 80% like his game version, just more realistic. He'd lost most of his memories, only remembered his name and basic things. I told him I was his lord, Simon Holland, and made up a believable story about what happened. Then I summoned all 44 unwounded soldiers at once, plus 8 warhorses. Ripples appeared everywhere, and people dropped out of thin air. They were all dizzy at first, but recovered quickly. None of them remembered much either. Ailey explained the situation to everyone. They were Simon Holland's personal soldiers, and I was about to become a baron. Right then, Ailey shouted a warning. Someone was spying on us. He charged like an angry bear, and my light infantry and archers spread out to surround the intruder. A few archers even loosed arrows, and one hit. A woman cried out in pain. Ailey dragged her back. She was young and attractive, and I recognized her immediately, the blonde woman from the tent when I first woke up. The original Simon had died in her arms. Thinking back on it, I realized she'd literally drained the life out of him. I grabbed a sword from one of my soldiers and pointed it at her throat. I asked if she was a witch. She panicked and denied it, saying she'd served me all night and I was fine. I shoved the blade through her neck. Blood gushed out like a broken faucet. She clutched her throat, twitched, and went still. Then something terrifying happened. Her body aged rapidly, from an 18-year-old girl to a woman in her 40s. Her skin turned bluish-green, like some kind of ghoul. My soldiers backed away in shock. I was rattled too, but kept my composure and told them she was a witch who used dark magic to harm people, then ordered them to burn the body. Before that, I had a soldier grab the cloth bag from her waist. Inside were half a black bread loaf, a small purse, some wild fruit, a tiny wooden saw, and most importantly, a leather-bound book, palm-sized, covered in writing I couldn't read. The pages were full of neat text and strange illustrations. It looked like a spell book, probably dark magic. Those things are incredibly rare and valuable. I tucked it into my game inventory. Then something horrifying happened. The dead witch suddenly let out an ear-splitting, crazed scream that sent a shockwave rippling through the air. My ears went numb. I spun around. She was sitting up. My soldiers stumbled back in terror, hands shaking on their weapons. 5 or 6 of them raised shields in front of me. She shot me one hateful look, then leaped up and scrambled into the forest on all fours like a spider, faster than a rabbit. She vanished in 4 or 5 seconds. Ailey looked at me, not sure what to do. I said we should pull back out of the woods first. Chasing her into unfamiliar dense forest wasn't smart. That scream had some kind of magical power in it. We needed to find someone who could tell us what exactly we were dealing with. We came out of the woods and met up with Hilter and the others. They were nervous and barely recognized me with all these armed soldiers behind me. Hilter couldn't figure out how I'd gotten a whole army just from going to pee. My troops did look impressive. Ailey and Sarit were the strongest, both in full heavy armor with armored warhorses. Ailey had lost his horse somehow, probably killed in the game. The rest were well-equipped too. Heavy infantry, light infantry, militia, archers, and cavalry. Even the light infantry had iron chain mail and helmets. This was a royal-level fighting force. I headed to the merchant camp to buy supplies. With this many soldiers, I felt a lot more confident walking around. First stop was a temporary stable area with hundreds of horses and mules. I bought 10 cargo wagons and 60 draft horses, haggling the price down to 21 gold eagles with Mad's help. I spent over an hour inspecting each horse. The original Simon's horse breeding knowledge came in handy. I also spotted a gorgeous brown warhorse named Ailey, shoulder height of 171, glossy coat, 5 years old, in his prime. I bought him for 23 gold eagles. Then I picked out a black medium-grade warhorse for 12 gold eagles to give to Ailey. A knight needs a horse. When I opened the inherited purse to pay, I counted 89 gold eagles, 35 silver deer, and some smaller coins. Not much for a baron, but Jolin and Sal had been soldiers their whole lives and never got to manage their land. After paying for everything including saddles, I'd spent over 60 gold eagles, most of the inheritance gone. I gave the extra draft horses simple saddles so infantry and archers could ride and save energy. The remaining horses would take turns pulling wagons so none got worked to death. Next I bought food, filling all 10 wagons with 800 pounds each. 5 wagons of rye, 3 of barley, 1 of wheat, and 1 of black beans. Rye was the cheapest but tasted awful, coarse and hard to swallow. Barley was a bit better. Wheat tasted the best but cost 10 times more than rye. Only nobles ate it. The black beans were mostly for the warhorses. Draft horses could just eat grass along the road, but warhorses needed proper nutrition. Maintaining cavalry is expensive. Even rich barons usually only keep a few dozen riders. I noticed some slave merchants selling beast folk, mostly dog-headed people about 1.50 to 60 tall. They were decent for mining, but not farming. I looked around hoping to find some beast-eared girls, but no luck. Disappointing. I bought some tents and basic supplies, then left the merchant camp. Kalair came over immediately. He looked surprised at my soldiers and asked who they were. I casually introduced Ailey and Sarit as my honor knights, Mad as my quartermaster, Yaman as my steward, and Kylan as my medic. The rest were my soldiers. Kalair stood there with his mouth open. He couldn't figure out how a nobody like me had found followers so fast and was already handing out honor knight titles. This clearly wasn't going according to his plan. I told him I'd agreed to marry his daughter, but I wanted to see her first. If she was ugly, I'd want a different one. Did he have more than one daughter? He said I'd actually already seen her. The tall woman in the fine brown robe stepped forward and curtsied gracefully. Lord Simon, I am Winnie's, she said in a sweet, respectful voice, her cheeks turning slightly pink. She was beautiful with an incredible figure. I'd already noticed her earlier. Not bad at all. I was honestly pretty satisfied with Winnie's. She was beautiful and carried herself like a noble woman. Kalair had raised her well. I asked bluntly if she was still a virgin. Kalair swore she was. Sal had signed the marriage contract and rushed off to war without touching her. I agreed to marry her. Winnie's blushed and looked down shyly. I smiled at her. Kalair laid out the deal. He'd escort me to Eagle City with his mercenary band. We'd hold the wedding there before the gods. Then he'd give me 4,000 gold eagles and 100 slave soldiers for building up my territory. Before leaving, I told him about the witch, how I killed her and she came back to life. He turned serious. He said she was a witch who practiced fallen dark arts, and since she'd revived, she'd become a dark creature, probably a spider woman. He said they're not hard to kill right after transforming, just cut off the head. But if she escaped into the forest, she'd come back for revenge. Then he casually mentioned that Winnie's was a formal mage, so I'd be safe. That caught me off guard. My fiancée was a mage. I immediately worried. In this world, female mages and witches look pretty much the same from the outside. Mages use normal magic with no side effects, while witches use dark arts that come with a price. After my experience with that witch, I couldn't help feeling a bit cautious, but I kept smiling and didn't show it. We set off south. Kalair's group joined mine. over 200 people total. His war spear mercenaries were well equipped, about 70 or 80 riders in iron armor, half on proper war horses and half on travel horses. After a few hours, we'd covered about 15 kilometers and made camp for the night on a flat stretch of ground with thin vegetation. Along the ride, I'd been asking Claire questions nonstop, learning things the original Simon never knew. This world sits on the Slore continent. The Eagle Kingdom is in the northeast, bordered by the ocean to the east, the sighing wasteland to the north, thorny swamps to the south, and hot dry desert to the west. The Shisai territory used to be part of the sighing wasteland. Not actually barren at all, just called that because it was inhabited by beast folk and other races, not humans. Marquis Val had just conquered it from the Beastmen with the royal army. The Beastmen took heavy losses and wouldn't attack again for 3 to 5 years, so we had time to develop the land. I also learned about the power system. This is a low magic world with 3 main combat classes: knights, mages, and warriors. Knights are strongest, mages second, warriors last. Knights and warriors are ranked by raw strength, literally how much weight you can lift. Both start at the entry level by lifting 200 pounds. The ranks go entry, low, mid, high, bronze, silver, gold. Warriors max out at gold level, 1,500 pounds. Knights share the same scale up to high level, but then pull ahead dramatically. Bronze knights lift 1,500 pounds, silver knights 2,000, gold knights 3,000. Bronze knights and above can also use special knight techniques that look like magic. And knights live much longer. Bronze knights can reach 150 years old, gold knights over 200, sometimes 300. Warriors only live 60 to 70 years. The big catch: knight breathing techniques are restricted to nobility by law. Any commoner caught practicing one gets executed. Warriors use a different training method called body tempering, which anyone can learn. That's why warriors are common among mercenaries and commoners, while knights are exclusively noble. Claire also told me about mages. They're the most mysterious power system. There are over a dozen mage organizations in the kingdom, the most famous being the Winterfort Mage Academy, the Royal Mage Corps, and the Nature's Hand Mage Association. Mage talent is something you're born with. Even a king can't become one without the gift. Mages have 7 ranks: beginner, apprentice, entry, mid, high, proficient, and master. Nature's Hand calls the top 2 ranks gray robe and white robe mages. Everyone else is a brown robe. But even a master mage's strongest fireball is only about as powerful as a rocket launcher. Decent, but 30 or 50 high-level warriors could still overwhelm one. After hearing all this, I figured the real path to power in this world was building up numbers. I needed to grow my forces. As evening came, Claire left to set up night defenses and sent Winnie's to keep me company. We chatted and got to know each other a bit. It was pleasant enough. I showed her the book I took from the witch. She examined it carefully and said it was a book of corruption containing dark magic. The cover read, Succubus Touch, a faction she'd never heard of. She started reading the first page aloud and translating, but when she got to a spell called Life Drain, her face turned bright red. I immediately guessed that was the spell the witch used to drain the original Simon to death. I asked what the book was worth. She said around 1,000 gold eagles on the black market, but it was illegal. Commoners get hanged and nobles lose a rank of their title if caught. She suggested destroying it. I pretended to put it back in my bag, but actually stored it in my game inventory. Too valuable to throw away, too dangerous to show around. Then I asked if she could teach me magic. She said she could, though she didn't know if I had the talent. She practiced something called the Earth Meditation Method and gave me a sheepskin scroll with the instructions. The writing was in magical script I couldn't read, so she started explaining it to me word by word. We got so absorbed that we didn't notice it getting dark. Kylan, my medic, came to tell us dinner was ready. I invited Winnie's to eat with me. Claire had provided the food: roast lamb chops, white bread, jam, cheese, and vegetable soup. Much better than anything I could manage with my basic grain supplies. His caravan traveled with dozens of live sheep in cages, plus chickens and rabbits across several wagons. I cut some white bread, spread cheese on it, and served it to Winnie's first. Dinner was quiet and polite. Afterward, we agreed to continue the magic lessons tomorrow and went to our separate tents. I'd hinted at sleeping together, but she wasn't that kind of girl. Different world, different customs. Alone in my dark tent, I started working on my upgrade points. I had 4 left and put 1 more into iron bones. After 15 minutes of that burning sensation, I felt incredibly strong. After testing, I figured each point of iron bones adds about 100 pounds of lifting power. With my base strength plus 2 points, I could now lift around 300 pounds, qualifying as a low-level warrior. I spent 1 point on scouting. My eyes got warm for about 10 minutes. Then a description appeared. If I stare at someone within 3 meters for 5 seconds, I can sense how strong they are compared to me. Green means safe, red means dangerous. The deeper the color, the bigger the threat. And if someone has hostile intentions toward me, I'll see black energy around them. The intensity depends on how hostile they are and my skill level. This was incredibly useful. Tomorrow I'd test it on Winnie's and Claire. I tried putting my last 2 points into battle aura and magic, but the system wouldn't let me. Turns out I need to actually practice a breathing method and a meditation method first, complete at least 1 full cycle. Then I can upgrade those skills. I had the plundering fire breathing technique and the earth meditation method, so once I learned to read magical script and practice them, I'd unlock those upgrades. I lay back down, thinking about how to develop my territory and recruit people. I was just drifting off when a piercing shriek ripped through the night and jolted me awake. I instantly pulled a steel sword from my inventory and held it in front of me. A piercing shriek woke me up. My guard said something was happening to the east. I figured it was the Spider Woman, the witch I'd killed earlier, coming back for revenge. But she couldn't be that strong, or she'd have attacked already. I felt somewhat safe knowing Ailey and Sarit were out there. Ailey had iron bones at level 10, silver warrior strength. Sarit was at 8, bronze level. Both were expert fighters who could handle dozens of regular soldiers. I pulled a full set of scale and chain armor from my inventory, helmet with chain face guard, arm guards, leg guards, armored boots. My storage had plenty of gear: apples, wheat, honey, iron bars, beef, several suits of fine armor, steel swords, an imperial longbow, polearms, even 2 warhorses. Everything stayed fresh in there. The armor was heavy, but with 2 points in iron bones I could handle it. Another scream rang out from the camp's edge, along with shouting from the guards. My 2 soldiers helping me suit up nearly dropped everything in fright. I told them to calm down. I went outside and learned that Claire had taken men to chase the creature, and Winnie's went with them. My fiancé had guts. While waiting, I studied my system more. I found an experience bar at the top of my interface, currently level 0, with about 200 out of 1,000 points filled. You gain experience from killing enemies, chopping wood, farming, managing territory, even sleeping. Killing gives the most, sleeping probably the least. About half an hour later, a bright white flash lit up the eastern forest for several seconds. Then Claire and Winnie's returned. She was carrying a slender staff about her height. Claire reported that the Spider Woman was transforming fast, already had 8 limbs. They couldn't kill her. I ordered bonfires lit around the camp and a third of the men on watch. Everyone else went to sleep. I lay down in full armor, uncomfortable, but safer. Then the screaming started again. Every half hour or so, another shriek from the forest. It made my heart race every time, some kind of magical effect in the sound. I realized what she was doing. She was trying to keep us all awake. Clever and nasty. I tried to ignore it and sleep, but then one scream came from right near the camp, so close it felt like she was next to my ear. I jumped up furious. Outside, soldiers were running around. The Spider Woman had come within sight of the guards. I could make out her shape in the distance. She was over 3 meters tall, moving like a long-legged spider, fast and agile. She wouldn't enter the camp, though. She seemed afraid of fire. I couldn't let this go on. I went back into my tent, pulled out the Imperial longbow and a quiver of armor-piercing arrows from my inventory, and gave them to Sarit. His archery skill was 86, expert level. He already had an oak bow, but the Imperial longbow was far more powerful. Sarit took one look at the Spider Woman's outline in the darkness, drew the bow, aimed for half a breath, and let the arrow fly. A horrible screech. He hit her. She scrambled away into the darkness. I told him she probably wouldn't be back tonight, gave him the bow and arrows to keep, and went back to my tent to finally get some sleep. I slept hard and woke up feeling refreshed. I put the Imperial longbow back in my inventory and headed out with my steel sword on my hip. Mad, my quartermaster, was guarding the tent. He's actually a high-level warrior with iron bones at 5, plus excellent archery and trading skills. After breakfast, vegetable soup, white bread with butter and cheese. The soldiers watching us looked envious. White bread costs 10 times more than black bread. Even well-off commoners treat it as a special treat for children. We packed up camp and set off. I rode my fine warhorse and enjoyed not having to do any of the work. Being a noble is nice. On the road, I used my scouting skill on Winnie's first. She glowed faintly red, stronger than me, but no black fog. She had no hostile intentions. I asked about the white light from last night. She said it was a light spell, useful for illumination and scaring dark creatures. I told her she was brave. She just smiled sweetly. I also checked Claire, deep red, meaning much stronger than me, but again no black fog. I could trust him. After 2 hours of travel, hoofbeats came from behind. A group of about 20 to 30 light cavalry caught up to us. A big brown-haired knight in plate chain armor called out, asking if this was Simon's caravan. He introduced himself as Knight Dole from the Andrew family of Haystack City. Claire tensed up immediately, but relaxed a bit once the man identified himself. Dole asked for me. He spotted me quickly. I was one of only 2 people on a fine warhorse, and the other was too old. He asked me to wait, saying that Jeffrey Andrew, heir to the Andrew family, wanted to talk. When I returned his noble greeting, still clumsy at it, I caught a flash of mockery on his face. He hit it fast, but I saw it. I already didn't like him. Soon Jeffrey arrived with 7 or 8 armored knights. He said his father, Viscount Bord Andrew, wanted to discuss a marriage alliance between our families. He handed over a sealed letter on fine sheepskin paper. I had Ailey take the letter first, checked it for anything suspicious, then read it with my armored gloves on, just in case of poison. The Viscount's offer was terrible. He was clearly trying to get something for nothing. I suspected they might even plan to kill me after the wedding and take my territory. But I kept a straight face and told Jeffrey I'd think it over and give my answer in Eagle City. He looked annoyed but couldn't argue since I hadn't refused outright. The moment they left, Claire rushed over looking anxious. I smiled and told him I was a man of my word. I only said that to keep the Andrews calm until we reached Eagle City, where I'd reject them properly. Claire relaxed, but I noticed him looking at me differently. He was starting to realize this 16-year-old wasn't as simple as he'd thought. We traveled the rest of the day and made camp at dusk. While everyone set up camp and cooked, I spent time with Winnie's, flirting a bit, then getting back to magic lessons before dark. During the midday break, I'd been teaching myself the plundering fire-breathing method. We only cooked twice a day. At noon, the soldiers just ate water-soaked black bread. I got white bread with cheese and some berries. At dinner, we shared a boiled chicken together, and it was pretty nice. I was gazing at the mountains in the distance when animal cries erupted from the nearby forest. My soldiers jumped into action, herding horses to the center of camp and lining up empty wagons in a circle as a makeshift wall. Jackalmen, one of the perimeter guards shouted. A mob of humanoid creatures burst from the trees. They were human-sized, some even bigger, with wolf-fox faces covered in yellowish-brown fur. Most had no armor. A few wore leather, and barely any had chainmail. Their weapons were mostly clubs, with some swords and spears mixed in. Total rabble. I wasn't scared at all, actually felt eager. But I held back from fighting personally. My combat skills were still too low, and dying to something stupid would be a disaster. Claire took charge. His archers fired first, dropping the dozen or so in front. The rest kept charging, brave but reckless. When they reached the wagon line, Claire's shield wall was ready. Soldiers thrust long spears through grooves in their wooden shields, skewering another wave. The jackalmen couldn't break through. Archers standing on wagons kept shooting from behind. It was over fast. Only 7 or 8 survivors fled whimpering back into the forest. I went to the edge of camp with Ailey's escort to look at the bodies. The blood smell made me a bit nauseous. A few jackalmen were still alive, whimpering on the ground. Ailey offered to finish them off, but I said no. I needed to get used to this. I drew my steel sword and cut off the first one's head. Blood poured everywhere. I felt like vomiting, but held it down. Then I killed the rest. The original Simon had been on a battlefield before, but never fought up close. I needed the practice. Claire asked how it felt. I grinned and said not bad, then handed my sword to Sarit for cleaning. That steel sword was quality, worth about 10 gold eagles in Eagle City. I lay down to sleep, exhausted from riding all day. Right on schedule, the Spider-Woman's shriek came from the forest. I cursed, stuffed my ears, and went back to sleep. She really couldn't do much besides annoy us. I slept like a rock until morning. Ailey reported that Sarit had scared her off with one arrow again, but she kept screaming from the woods until almost dawn. This couldn't go on. Ailey suggested taking 10 men into the forest at night with Kalaire's support to hunt her down. She looked scary, but wasn't invincible. I told him we'd discuss it after breakfast. Breakfast was bland as usual, just salty wheat porridge. Salt in this world comes in several grades. The finest is snow salt, white and powdery with no bitterness. I eat gold salt, which is decent but slightly yellow and a bit bitter. The worst kinds, sea salt and black salt, are nearly inedible and only fed to slaves. Kalaire provides my salt. After breakfast, several groups of riders arrived from the north carrying letters for me. Every single one was a marriage proposal. There was even one from an earl, the Winson family from Storm City, a windy place with poor soil but good fishing and salt production. He offered 1,000 gold eagles, 1,000 slaves, 200 regular soldiers on loan, and a salt trading license. None of them beat Kalaire's offer, though. The second best was another merchant offering 2,000 gold eagles, 500 serfs, and 30 mercenaries. The earl's deal was tempting, but as the last surviving member of my family, I couldn't risk a political marriage with a higher noble who might try to absorb me. We marched until noon across open plains. I called Kalaire over to discuss the Spider-Woman problem. He agreed she was becoming a real issue. Soldiers weren't sleeping well, and if this dragged on for a month, it would be serious. The problem was she was too fast and stayed in the forest at night where we couldn't chase her. I came up with a simple plan. We'd dig deep pits, at least 4 meters, on the plain between our camp and the forest. I'd stand behind the traps as bait. When she charged at me, she'd fall in, and everyone would rush over and stab her with spears. Kalaire was worried about the danger, but eventually agreed. Most of the men started digging while cooks prepared a big dinner as reward. I sat in a wagon studying the plundering fire-breathing method. It was written in common script with body diagrams, so I could read it all. The technique isn't complicated, but normally takes years. You start training at 6 to 8 years old, and if you have talent, you awaken a life seed and produce battle aura by 16. Before Bronze Knight level, battle aura only circulates inside your body to boost physical abilities. After Bronze, you can release it externally as Knight techniques. The plundering fire method includes an attack called plundering fire slash, offense-focused, though probably not overwhelmingly powerful given this world's limits on individual combat strength. I went to my tent and practiced the breathing method for 2 hours. When I checked my interface afterward, the battle aura option was now unlocked with plundering fire breathing method displayed next to it. I immediately invested 1 upgrade point. Heat rushed through my body and gathered in my left chest. Something formed there and spread through me with each heartbeat. I understood instinctively. This was the life seed condensing. I was now a real knight. Even among nobles, true knights aren't that common. There's a saying in the Eagle Kingdom, a knight is always a noble, but a noble isn't always a knight. I tested myself outside. About 100 more pounds of lifting strength, comparable to a mid-level warrior. Still not great since the original Simon's body had been drained by that witch. I put my last upgrade point into Battle Aura 2. After the heat passed through me again, I was now at high warrior level. Iron Bones and Battle Aura stacked together, each point adding about 100 pounds of strength. Many noble knights train both paths simultaneously, though they usually focus on the knight path. With high warrior strength, I felt much more confident about tonight's Spider-Woman hunt. My experience bar was nearly half full too. I'd probably hit level 2 by the time we reached Eagle City. I was planning to put 1 point into magic and 1 into resistance, which boosts poison immunity and elemental defense. Nobles love using poison, so better safe than sorry. As evening approached, the clouds thickened and it looked like rain was coming. After sunset, the wind picked up and a light rain started falling. The traps were ready. 3 big pits with sharpened wooden stakes at the bottom, covered with branches and grass. I sat with Ailey, Sarit, 2 heavy infantry, and Winnie's by a bonfire right behind the pits, facing the eastern forest. Winnie's and I chatted quietly while waiting. I told her to go back because of the rain, but she said her mage robe was waterproof and offered to grab me an umbrella. Just as she stood up to leave, a horrible scream came from the forest. About a dozen shriveled figures came sprinting out, ghouls. The first few ran straight into the pits. "Ghouls," Winnie shouted. She raised her staff and cast a spell. A glowing white orb the size of a lychee floated up and lit everything within dozens of meters like daylight. The ghouls slowed down, shielding their faces from the light. Sarit started shooting. His first arrow knocked one down, but it got back up. Winnie's told us to aim for the head. That's an instant kill. Sarit's next arrow punched right through a ghoul's skull, and it stayed down. I ordered everyone to fall back to camp. I wasn't going to play hero with only a few guards. 4 or 5 ghouls made it past the pits through the gaps. They carried rusty weapons and moved terrifyingly fast, like Olympic sprinters. But my heavy infantry and Sarit cut them all down easily. They looked scary, but were actually weak fighters. Then came another shriek from the forest. The Spider-Woman charged out on her long legs. I turned and ran straight back to camp. Claire's men rushed forward to meet her. Suddenly, I heard her yelp. She'd fallen into the 3rd pit. The ghouls had only triggered 2 traps, and the northern one was still intact. She'd charged right over it. Turning into a monster had clearly made her dumber. Claire's men surrounded the pit and stabbed down with spears over and over. By the time I walked over with a spear of my own, the Spider-Woman was full of holes, leaking green blood, barely alive. She was about 3 meters tall with a bluish woman's head where spider eyes should be, 8 limbs, and a pair of sharp pincers up front. A lone fighter would need at least Bronze Knight strength to beat her. I yelled for everyone to stop. They looked at me confused. I aimed my spear at her head and drove it in, then stabbed again and again. After about 15 thrusts, she finally went still, and I heard a chime in my head. I'd leveled up. 1 new upgrade point. I tossed the spear to a soldier and asked if this thing was worth money. Winnie said Spider-Woman parts are useful to alchemists. The pincers, blood, and bone ash could sell for at least 200 gold coins. I put her in charge of harvesting the materials and told her my soldiers would help however she needed. She smiled sweetly and got to work. I went back to camp, set up the night watch rotation, and fell asleep immediately. Sarit stayed behind to help with the body. Every little task was handled by someone else. Everyone treated me with respect. The food was still mediocre, but life was definitely getting better. I even started dreaming about building up my territory. It rained during the night, but I slept well in my waterproof tent. When I woke up, I was sore from sleeping in armor again. I checked my troop roster and noticed something worrying. Yaman's loyalty had dropped from 100 to 99, and over a dozen others had dipped too. I wasn't sure why. Maybe the hard travel or the poor food was getting to them. They weren't just game data anymore. They were real people with real feelings. I decided to spend my new upgrade point on leadership. It expanded my troop capacity from 281 to 581, and it makes everyone in my roster gain 1 loyalty point per week, as long as they don't have a grudge against me. 4 points a month, 48 a year. That should keep things stable. My appetite had grown huge. 3 bowls of porridge, a 2-pound white bread loaf, and half a block of cheese, and I still wanted more. The stronger warriors ate a lot too, but they only got extra porridge and black bread with butter. Winnie's came by with money from the Spider-Woman materials. Her father's trading company bought the parts for 210 gold eagles. I took the purse without hesitating. Over the next 20-some days, nothing major happened. We saw jackalmen and dog-headed people a few times, but they ran when they saw our numbers. We also spotted a giant tribe, just a dozen or so, herding woolly elephants that looked like mammoths. The giants were 3 to 5 meters tall, even the young ones nearly 2 meters. I watched from a distance, fascinated. I thought about recruiting giants into my army. Imagine one in full armor with a battle axe. But Winnie said people had tried before. Giants won't take orders, won't travel far from their tribe, and only work as temporary hires for trade goods. I dropped the idea. One day Claire told me we'd entered Valor territory, my future land. I perked up immediately. We rode around for half a day scouting. The place was genuinely impressive. There was a fertile plain of about 300 square kilometers with 2 rivers running southeast through it. Marquis Val had clearly done me a favor picking this spot, but it was completely undeveloped. A typical inland baron gets about 50 square kilometers of settled land with tax-paying residents already living on it. I was starting from nothing. The initial investment would be enormous, and it could take decades to build into a proper territory. We camped on the plains one night, then kept moving. After another 2 weeks, we finally left the Shisai region and reached a human town called Long Forest. Winnie's got a bit excited. Before the Shisai conquest, this was the kingdom's most remote northwestern settlement. There are 2 routes into Shisai from the kingdom, one through Red Rock Pass in the north, and one heading north from Long Forest, which is the easier path. Claire suggested resting here for a day to resupply food. I agreed immediately. After weeks on the road, I stank. Everyone did. Even Winnie's had a faint smell of sweat. At least I'd been washing my face every day, or I'd look like a beggar. We arrived at Long Forest Town, the territory of Baron Gill. The castle wasn't big, about 20 acres with walls 5 to 6 meters high, gray-brown stone, medieval Western style. Outside the castle walls was a 3-meter earth wall enclosing the main town with rows of longhouses, homes, and shops. Beyond that, merchants and travelers camped outside. Our group of nearly 300 people naturally caught the guards' attention, but they just watched from the walls without doing anything. Claire told me the entry fee was 1 silver sheep per person. I thought Baron Gill was quite the businessman. I told Mad to get all my soldiers inside and handed him some gold eagles and silver sheep. Claire watched quietly, clearly puzzled why I trusted these soldiers who'd appeared out of nowhere more than him, my future father-in-law and financier. The town smelled bad, animal droppings everywhere, though 2 townsmen were slowly cleaning with pushcarts. Civilians stepped aside when they saw us coming. Nobody argues with armed men. I checked 3 inns. The biggest one, Long Forest Inn, was nicely decorated but nearly empty, usually a bad sign meaning overpriced or poor service. The other 2 were too small for our group, so we came back to the first one. I ordered big for everyone: roast beef, sausage, roast fish, black bread, vegetable soup, butter, apples, and malt beer per person. For myself, I added white bread, cheese, and stewed wild chicken. The waitress went from bored to all smiles. The food was much better than road cooking, real spices and good salt. Everyone ate like wolves. The beef slabs were as big as 2 palms. While we were finishing, the shopkeeper slipped out and came back with a squad of guards posted outside. He was worried we'd skip on the bill. Fair enough, 40-some armored men showing up would make anyone nervous. Mad haggled the total down to 15 silver deer and 6 silver sheep, less than 1 gold eagle. That was nothing to me. Then I ordered hot water for baths. We split into 2 groups, 1 washing, 1 standing guard. Mad bought over 40 sets of linen underclothes for the soldiers and a nicer wool linen outfit for me that cost over a gold eagle. It had some woven patterns and felt decent. I went upstairs. Ailey and Sarit helped me out of my armor, and I climbed into a wooden tub. The hot water felt incredible after weeks on the road. Then Ailey knocked and asked if I wanted a woman sent up. The offer was tempting, very tempting, but I forced myself to say no. These random prostitutes could be anyone. I remembered a Korean movie where a king got stabbed in the neck by the woman underneath him mid-act. Blood spraying everywhere. That image stuck with me. I'm the last heir of my family. I can't take stupid risks. After the water went cold, I dried off, put on the new clothes, had soldiers help me back into my armor, and went downstairs. A butler-looking man was waiting outside. He said Baron Gill invited me to visit the castle. He seemed to have been waiting quite a while. A butler named Chadrick came to invite me to Baron Gill's castle. He said it was on the Baron's orders. I looked him over and politely declined, saying I was in a hurry to reach Eagle City for my investiture and would visit on my way back. But Chad pushed hard, too hard. That set off alarm bells. I'd never met Baron Gill. There was no reason for such an urgent invitation. Something was wrong. I told him I needed to check with my fiancée first, just to buy time. Then I ordered my men to finish bathing within 30 minutes. When everyone was clean, dressed in fresh clothes, and back in armor, I said we were leaving immediately. Chad was still waiting outside the inn. I invited him to come to the edge of town with me, but he refused. He wanted me to go to the castle alone. The streets now had 3 squads of guards, 36 men total, in decent gear. I noted them, but kept walking calmly. I even stopped to order 2,000 pounds of barley from some shops and had it delivered outside the walls. Once we were outside the town, I relaxed. A regular baron has maybe 100 or 200 real soldiers. Beyond the walls, he couldn't threaten our group of nearly 300. I told Claire about the invitation. He confirmed my suspicion. The baron was probably up to no good. He advised me to avoid all noble social events until Winnie's and I had at least 1 heir. These old noble families are all connected in complicated ways. Their favorite methods are poison, assassins, and hired bandits. He said once I was invested and back in Valor territory, I should focus on building my land and stay safe. He mentioned that assassinating a lord is a huge taboo among nobles. A southern earl once hired someone to kill a rival, and the king stripped him down to baron. Within decades, neighboring nobles destroyed his family completely. I told Sarit to find a gate guard and pass a message to Chad. I had urgent business and would visit another time. Then we mounted up and left. What I didn't know at the time was that behind those castle walls, Baron Gil was furious. Chad reported that I had 40-plus well-equipped soldiers and the War Spear mercenary band with me. Too many to handle easily. Gil considered poisoning our food, but we'd left too quickly. He sent Chad riding after us with a new trick, claiming he wanted to marry his daughter to me, a message meant for my ears only. He also wrote a letter on sheepskin and sent it by raven to someone unknown. Meanwhile, riding along, I checked my troop roster and found that loyalty across the board had jumped back to full, nearly everyone at 100. The meal, the bath, and the new clothes had worked wonders. I also noticed that all my wounded soldiers in the roster had healed completely. I thought about summoning them, but decided to wait until after the investiture when we returned to Valor territory. More soldiers means more food and wages, and I didn't need them yet. Once we entered the Forest Valley region, there were actual roads, so we moved faster. About an hour in, riders caught up to us. It was Chad again, the butler from Baron Gil. He wanted to see me. I cursed under my breath. Nothing good could come from this. I let him approach alone while his escorts stayed behind. He rode close and whispered that Baron Gil had a daughter my age and wanted to discuss a match. Something about it felt completely wrong. I'd already refused once, and now he was chasing me down? I made a snap decision. "Seize him," I shouted. Ailey and Sarit grabbed him off his horse instantly. His escort stirred, but Kalaire's men had them surrounded. I drew my sword and pressed the tip to Chad's neck, demanding to know what Gil really wanted. He tried to bluff, but when the blade broke skin and a thin line of blood ran down his throat, he crumbled instantly. He confessed everything. Baron Gil had received secret orders from Count Anderson to kill me. The Count wanted to get a barony in Shisai for his favorite illegitimate son, but the son had no military merit and couldn't earn land normally. I was the weakest of the 15 lords who'd been granted territories. No real backing, no family connections. The easiest target. My heart sank. The road to Eagle City was more dangerous than I'd thought, and Anderson probably wasn't the only one watching me. I let Chad go but kept his fine warhorse, a warning to Baron Gil. Killing the butler would have created a blood feud I couldn't afford yet. Long Forest Town sat on an important trade route, and I didn't have the strength for a real confrontation. Chad scrambled onto one of his escort's horses and galloped away. One poor rider was left on foot, sprinting after them. Kalaire urged me to hurry out of Gil's territory. We picked up the pace. Hours passed with no pursuit. Gil wasn't willing to burn through his own forces doing Count Anderson's dirty work. We passed several villages and another baron's castle over the following days, but didn't stop. The Forest Valley had been under kingdom control for nearly a century, so it was safer than Shisai, though nights in the wilderness still held dangers. I even saw ghosts drifting through the forest once. Creepy looking but harmless, couldn't even hurt commoners. After another 2 weeks of travel, we were making good progress. At this rate, we'd reach Eagle City within a month. The weather got hotter as we went south. Iron armor soaks up heat fast, so our midday breaks got longer. During those rests, I studied magic language with Winnie's. We'd grown very close by now. Lots of cuddling, and if we hadn't been out in the wilderness, we'd have gone further. I'd memorized over 200 magic characters and could read large portions of the Earth meditation method. Every evening I practiced swordsmanship and archery with Sarit. My single-handed weapon skill had reached 30, apprentice level. Archery was still only at beginner stage, hard to aim properly. One afternoon, while I was getting cozy with Winnie's, some villagers approached our perimeter and started talking to the mercenary guards. They seemed to have some kind of trouble. I ignored it and stayed in Winnie's soft embrace. Then Kalaire's deputy Rick came over and awkwardly interrupted. The villagers had a request, and Kalaire wanted me to come discuss it. Winnie's gently pushed me away, blushing furiously. Rick caught a glimpse, quickly looked away, and nervously led me to Kalaire. Kalaire pulled me aside and explained the situation. Villagers from Rest Village wanted to hire us to wipe out a bandit camp on Blade Tip Mountain. 200 gold eagles reward. His mercenaries were eager for the money, and if he refused, they'd resent him. Mercenary loyalty runs on profit. I told him to go ahead. I could protect myself. We'd camp by the Green Valley Road and wait for them to come back. He worried about me trusting Ailey's men too much, calling them former mercenaries who'd do anything for money. I smiled and told him I knew what I was doing. They were left to me by my cousin. That made Kalaire go quiet. He'd assumed I was completely dependent on him, but now I had soldiers he couldn't explain. It was clearly messing with his plans. He said he'd be back in 5 days at most, and left Winnie's and the servants in my care. The mercenary band gathered up and departed within half an hour. Every man got 1 gold eagle from the advance payment. Officers got 2, lieutenants got 3. After they'd been gone a couple hours, I felt uneasy with just 40-something soldiers. I took Ailey and Sarit into the forest and summoned every remaining soldier from my roster, all the ones who'd healed from their injuries. Now I had over 120 troops, 6 heavy cavalry, 14 light cavalry, 9 heavy infantry, 21 light infantry, 18 longbowmen, and the rest were militia. They all came out dizzy and amnesiac like before, but recognized faces. After Ailey and Sarit explained things, they all pledged loyalty. When Winnie saw them, she was confused, but I just said they were soldiers my predecessors left me. She didn't push for more. I had Yaman take 50 men to cut trees and build a proper camp. They worked about 7 or 8 hours and built an impressive wooden fort, double-layered log walls over 3 meters high in a hexagonal shape, enclosing about 7 or 8 acres. 6 corners each had a watchtower nearly 5 meters tall that could serve as archer platforms. 1 gate faced the road, and they'd built a small wooden cabin inside, about 20 square meters, obviously meant for me. I ordered that no one could relieve themselves inside the fort during daytime. 5 lashes for violators. A latrine pit would be dug in the western corner for nighttime use. Dinner was 2 whole sheep plus chicken for Winnie's and me. My soldiers each got a share of mutton. The servants only got porridge with black bread and a tiny spoonful of butter. After eating well, I pulled Winnie's into the wooden cabin with me. She hesitated at first, but gave in. Inside, I took off my armor and had someone bring a bucket of clean water. I stripped down and started washing with a linen cloth. Winnie's blushed, but helped scrub my back. Then I helped wash her, and in the quiet of the night, the sound of cards being played drifted through the air. The next morning, I walked out of the cabin feeling fantastic. Winnie's came out too, walking a bit awkwardly after her first time. I ordered Mad to stew 2 chickens for her. We had a sweet morning together. I noticed Sarit guarding the door with dark circles under his eyes. He said he couldn't sleep. I realized he'd probably heard us through the thin walls, even though we'd tried to keep quiet. I told him to get some rest and sent Ailey to replace him. After breakfast, I continued studying the earth meditation method with Winnie's. By midday, I felt ready to try meditating for real. I sat for over an hour following her instructions exactly. Nothing happened. Magic requires natural talent, and without it, no amount of practice helps. But I gained enough experience from recent activities to level up, including, I discovered, quite a lot of experience from my night with Winnie's. That opened a whole new door. I spent the upgrade point on magic. Knowledge of the earth meditation flooded my mind instantly. Within moments, I felt a magic seed form inside me. My eyes briefly flashed pale yellow. "You did it," Winnie said, amazed. She taught me Mage Hand, a basic apprentice spell. I learned it in about 2 hours, picking up a small stone with an invisible hand. Winnie's was shocked. It had taken her over a month to learn the same spell. "Are you some kind of genius?" she asked. "Seems pretty simple. Anyone with hands could do it," I said casually. She went quiet. Then a soldier reported that people were spying on our camp. Ailey went to investigate, chased them off, and brought back a prisoner, a young man in studded leather armor with dirty yellow-brown hair. After a beating, the guy talked fast. He was from the Iron Hill mercenary band, 154 men total. They'd been hired to kill someone, he didn't know who, and his pay was 5 silver deer. They were planning to attack soon. I understood immediately. Someone had set this up. The village request that drew Kalera away was probably a trap, a classic scheme to separate me from my strongest protection. Winnie's panicked, worried about her father. I told her Kalera was a gold-level warrior and could handle himself. The real target was me, not him. The bandits just wanted to get his mercenaries away first. I'd been quietly upgrading my people too. Yaman got iron bones and engineering boosts. Mad got iron bones and trading. Sarit got iron bones and trainer skill, which helps soldiers improve their weapon skills faster. I was saving Kylan's points to develop her into a mage. She'd make a good chief mage for Valor territory someday. Plus, she was easy on the eyes. Ailey had 5 upgrade points saved up too, but I wanted to give him battle aura, and he hadn't learned a breathing method yet. No time for that now. I told Winnie's our best move was to hold the fort and wait 5 days. If Kalera didn't return, we'd head to Eagle City on our own. If something happened to him, her brother could inherit the business and our marriage agreement would stand. She was still worried, but when I explained that leaving the fort to find Kalera was exactly what the enemy wanted, She calmed down. The mercenary band wasn't the target, I was. A few kilometers from our fort, the Iron Hill Mercenary Band, over 150 men, was camped by a forest. Their leader was a stocky man named Tiller, supposedly part dwarf with incredibly strong arms. His scouts had been caught, so now he knew our camp was fortified with log walls and watchtowers, with more soldiers than expected. He sent a squad leader called Hound to probe our defenses that night. I waited until midnight with no attack, so I split my men into 2 shifts and went to sleep with Winnie's. Eventually shouting woke me up. They'd come. But it was just harassment, arrows flying over the walls in the dark. The servants panicked and huddled against the western wall. I had Winnie's help me into my armor and stepped outside. An arrow immediately thunked into the doorframe next to me. I ducked and told Winnie's to stay inside. My infantry raised shields around me. Sarit reported the problem. It was too dark for our archers to see the enemy. I called Winnie's back out and asked her to cast light. She needed her staff, though. She hadn't memorized the light rune in her mental space, so she couldn't cast it quickly without it. She explained that formal mages can build spell runes in a spiritual space inside their minds for quick casting. Staffs also help by boosting power, reducing mana cost, and storing 1 to 3 spell runes. Hers was called Guardian's Radiance. It could cast light and healing. A soldier sprinted to fetch it from her fancy carriage. When he brought it back, I handed it to Winnie's and grabbed a shield to cover her as we moved to a watchtower. She cast the spell. A blazing white orb lit up the area like daylight for about 18 seconds. That was all Sarit and my longbowmen needed. They killed over a dozen enemies, including Hound himself. Sarit put an arrow straight through his eye into his brain, not even knowing he'd killed their squad leader. The attackers scattered into the dense forest in panic. Some of them ran into ghouls and wandering corpses lurking in the woods. Ailey wanted to chase them. I said no, everyone stays inside until dawn. I had Mad prepare a late-night meal, wheat porridge with big chunks of butter. The soldiers were very happy with that. Winnie's and I shared half a white bread and some cheese, then went back to the cabin. No removing armor this time. We just laid down in our gear with her staff within arm's reach. We slept until the sun was high, stepped outside together, stretched, and looked up at a clear blue sky with scattered white clouds. Another beautiful day. Back at their camp, the Iron Hill mercenaries were furious. Hound was dead, arrow through the eye. Their scouts reported we had at least 20 elite archers and a mage. Tiller, their leader, raged about the bad intelligence and called off the contract, demanding more money from whoever hired them. Meanwhile, I sent militia to collect the loot from last night. About a dozen iron swords and studded leather armor, most damaged by arrows but still worth something, plus small purses of copper and silver from each body. Ailey wanted to send cavalry out to find the enemy camp. I said no. Finding them wouldn't help. We couldn't wipe out a whole mercenary band anyway. Ailey was a fierce fighter, but not much of a strategist. Sarit was much better. His game background described him as a trained military officer. 3 days passed. I kept busy studying magic with Winnie's and practicing swords and archery with Sarit. Then Ailey spotted Kalaire's men coming down the road. Winnie's was overjoyed and ran to the watchtower. They'd clearly been in a fight. Blood on their armor, fewer men than before. But they'd completed the job. When Kalaire entered the fort, he immediately noticed I had way more soldiers than when he left. I told him about the Iron Hill attack. He said they were weaker than his War Spear band and not a real threat, but he was clearly bothered by my growing army. He warned me about taking in unknown people. I told him flatly that these were my soldiers. I trusted them, and he didn't need to know more. His expression darkened for a moment. Then he smiled and agreed. The power balance between us was shifting. I now had more men than him. After a big lunch of roasted sheep, we abandoned the fort and continued toward Eagle City. The rest of the journey was peaceful, just the occasional ghoul or wandering corpse. The kingdom's interior had been tamed for centuries. I noticed the locals were tough. Even farmers carried short knives or kept spears in their fields. Finally, we spotted Eagle City in the distance. It was the real deal. Only 3 actual cities I'd seen on this entire journey. The road was busy with merchant caravans and travelers. The mercenaries relaxed, some laughing and joking about what they'd do in the city. Kalaire told me to find him at White Gull Harbor, about 70 li east of the city, after my investiture. The 100 slave soldiers he'd promised were almost ready. He also suggested I buy more slaves there to develop my territory, since no free citizens would willingly move to an undeveloped frontier like Valor territory. He explained that the slaves came from the central continent across the Storm Sea to the east. The Eagle Kingdom had been founded over 500 years ago by fleeing nobles from there. That continent now had 5 nations constantly at war, selling prisoners and captured civilians to slave traders who shipped them here at double the price. The sea was only calm 1 or 2 months a year, barely enough for one round trip. These slaves were the same race as us, making them much more useful than beast folk. I told Kalair to go ahead and start buying serfs, blacksmiths, stonemasons, and carpenters. I authorized up to 2,000 gold eagles in spending. He nodded, took his mercenaries, and left. Winnie stayed with me. I looked at Eagle City ahead and smiled. Time to go get my title. We reached Eagle City, and it was impressive. Gray-white walls about 10 meters high with arrow towers even taller, the whole thing oval-shaped and about 20 li across, built around a small hill. No blind spots for defenders, plus a barbican at the gate. You'd need tens of thousands of elite soldiers to take this place. At the gate, a guard officer stopped us. No mercenaries allowed in armor. Ailey started arguing, but I waved him quiet. The officer told me that as a baron, I could only bring my knights and 10 armored soldiers inside. Everyone else had to stay in Fledgling Town, a bustling settlement just outside the west wall. I gave Mad 10 gold eagles to cover wages and supplies for the 100+ soldiers staying behind. I decided to pay monthly. Militia got 2 silver sheep. Light infantry 4 silver sheep. Longbowmen 1 silver deer. Heavy infantry 2 silver deer. Light cavalry 1 silver deer and 6 silver sheep. Heavy cavalry 5 silver deer. These were all professional soldiers now, not conscripts. I took Winnie's, her maids, Ailey, Sarit, and 10 guards into the city. The streets were wide with dedicated horse lanes down the middle. Reasonably clean too. People collected the horse droppings, and public urination was clearly banned. It felt like a proper capital. I didn't waste time washing up or resting. Worried about assassination attempts before my title was official, I went straight to the government office beside the royal castle. The guards wouldn't let us in at first, but once I explained my business, they reported inside. A well-dressed man in fine wool robes came out and checked the Marquis's sealed letter without touching it. He confirmed the seal was authentic and told me to follow him. My armed escorts came too. Nobody stopped them. I found the security oddly relaxed until we reached an inner courtyard guarded by 18 warriors in heavy armor with red cloaks. Elite royal soldiers. Only I could enter, unarmed. I handed my sword to Ailey and walked in carrying just the letter. Inside was a grand but simply furnished room. Just a black desk where a brown-haired middle-aged man was writing with a quill. He didn't look up for a while. This was McKen, the king's hand. When he finally finished, he glanced at me and said, "You're the lucky one, Simon. You're quite tall." I smiled awkwardly. At over 1.80 meters, I was big for this world and still growing. He read the Marquis's letter carefully, studied my face, then told his assistant Dilly to set me up at the Golden Eagle residence, a place only real lords and heirs could stay. He said the investiture ceremony would be in a few days. Since House Holland was brand new, I need a family crest and motto designed quickly. Lucky little guy? I'm almost jealous, McKen joked. He seemed like an easygoing person. On the way out, Dilly introduced himself as the second son of the Viscount of Blackrock Castle. His attitude had warmed up considerably. He couldn't hide his envy when he mentioned the Golden Eagle residence was exclusively for lords and their heirs. I kept smiling humbly while my guards followed us to the residence. There was separate housing nearby for retainers. The Golden Eagle residence was luxurious, like a small palace with flowers everywhere and gold-colored paint on the walls. Not real gold, but it looked impressive. I settled in with Winnie's and finally had a proper hot bath, followed by some quality time together. I stayed inside for days, studying magic with Winnie's and never going out. All our meals were delivered by servants, and Winnie's checked every dish for poison using a detection spell. If anything was poisoned, it would start smelling foul within seconds. That's why every lord keeps a chief mage on staff. Personal safety above all else. After several days with no word about my investiture, I got anxious. Maybe I needed to send gifts? But with the Marquis backing me, there shouldn't be trouble. I waited 2 more days, nearly ready to go investigate, when a counselor from the government office finally showed up with a court tailor to design my family crest. I kept it simple, a sun and moon shining together. For the family motto, I chose unyielding and enduring. Nothing flashy, nothing that would attract attention. A few days later, I got the notice. The The ceremony was tomorrow at the Golden Eagle Castle, the royal residence. I scrubbed my armor until it gleamed and arrived early the next morning with Ailey and Sarit. Security was tight. I could wear armor but no sword, and my guard stayed outside. The ceremony hall had about a dozen officials standing silently along the walls, including someone in white robes who looked like a priest. Soon, Crown Prince Eldon Bavrick entered, a tall, handsome man in pale yellow with a red cape, flanked by guards and maids. "You're that lucky one, Simon?" he said cheerfully. I confirmed, and he drew his sword. I dropped to one knee. He laid the blade on my shoulder and delivered the investiture speech with practiced authority. I recited my oath of loyalty, not to the prince, but to King Dryo Bavrick. Getting that wrong would have been a disaster. I'd rehearsed it dozens of times. The ceremony was quick and smooth. As the prince left, he tossed one last remark over his shoulder. "Hire an etiquette tutor. Your form is terrible." Afterward, the guide told me my lord's coronet and baron's seal were being crafted. I need to stay in the city a few more days. He also explained that all Shisai nobles got 3 years tax-free, then only 10% for the next decade. The kingdom would also organize free citizens to relocate to Shisai, and every noble would have to settle some of them. I should prepare. I was thrilled. In a few months, I'd be back on my land, ruling my own territory. It was June now. I'd arrive around October, just in time to plant rye for a harvest the following summer. Back at the residence, I celebrated with Winnie's. Over the next days, I explored the city with my guards, finally relaxing. Now that I was an officially invested baron, assassination inside the capital would be a major crime. The Noble Elders Council would demand someone important pay for it. In the kingdom's history, that kind of thing almost never happened during peacetime. On the 9th day, my coronet and seal arrived. The seal was small, copper, engraved with Valor Territory and the Sun Moon crest. The coronet was a copper ring with a red gemstone set in the front and the family crest on either side. House Holland was now officially born. Uncle Jolin and Cousin Sal had both died before completing these steps. I was the one who finished what they started. Winnie's couldn't stop staring at the coronet, beaming with joy. Becoming nobility is every commoner's dream in this kingdom, and here it was right in front of her. I had a servant bring red ink, stamped the seal on my palm to test it. The Sun Moon crest came out clean alongside the Valor Territory text. Then I put everything into my game inventory when Winnie's wasn't looking. The next day, we left Eagle City. I'd wanted to buy plate chain armor there, but heard it was cheaper in White Gull Harbor. I did visit some magic and alchemy shops, picked up a few healing and medicine potions, but skipped everything else. A basic fire spark staff cost 600 gold eagles, which could buy 100 trained slave soldiers instead. Easy choice. We grabbed the main army from fledgling town. I secretly bought extra grain for my inventory, and we rode east. Everyone had horses, so we reached White Gull Harbor before noon. It was a real coastal city, about half the size of Eagle City, with a harbor full of ships and sails dotting the sea. The city was open, no weapons restrictions, but security was tight. Patrols of 18 well-armed soldiers came by constantly, all battle-hardened veterans. Kalair met us inside and bowed. "Greetings, Baron Simon." I asked about slaves. He'd bought over 800 from a recent shipment, but supply was tight. Every Shisai noble was buying them up as fast as they arrived. The 300 trained slave soldiers he'd ordered from Slave Bay hadn't come yet, including my 100. "Should be a few days." He suggested we hold the wedding while we waited. I smiled and said his daughter was wonderful. Winnie's blushed happily. I told him to handle the arrangements. Then I remembered something. I called Hilter over. He and my 4 other hometown friends had been riding at the back of the column this whole time. I gave him an important mission. Go back to Jade Flower Village, bring my mother and sister here, and spread the word. Anyone willing to move to Valor Territory was welcome. My offer: only 40% agricultural tax for 20 years, and whoever clears farmland gets the rights to use it. The standard kingdom rate is 50%, so this was genuinely attractive. I sent Sarit with 20 soldiers as escorts and gave both him and Hilter a gold eagle for travel expenses, far more than Hilter needed, but I wanted my old friends to show off a little back home. They had horses, so they'd be back in about 3 days. Kalair took us to his estate outside the city, a manor built on land rented from the local count. The rent was year to year, completely unstable. If the count decided not to renew, Kalair would lose everything he'd invested there. He'd been basically turned into a money-making tool for the local nobles, and their demands kept growing. That was a big reason he'd spent so much to marry Winnie's to me. He needed an escape route. He could have sworn loyalty to me and gotten a knight's title, but the man had bigger ambitions. He wanted nothing less than his own barony someday. We arrived at Kalaire's Windroom estate after a couple hours. The place was impressive, over 300 acres with dozens of buildings, large farmland, and a thick earth wall surrounding everything. It looked like a baron's headquarters, minus a castle. The fields were golden with wheat ready for harvest. Kalaire had put my slaves to work reaping. He said they were skilled farmhands and offered me the entire harvest as a gift. About 1,400 bushels, roughly 40,000 pounds of grain. I accepted, though I quickly calculated it would only feed 3,000 people for a week. I asked about skilled slaves. He'd found 3 blacksmiths, 7 carpenters, 1 horse breeder, 2 cooks, 17 construction workers, and 5 stonemasons. All expensive. The skilled ones cost at least 3 gold eagles each, and 1 experienced blacksmith cost as much as a fine warhorse. I told him to buy more craftsmen from the next shipments, plus enough serfs to reach 2,000 total and 300 oxen with carts. The math was sobering. 2,000 serfs would cost only 5 or 600 gold eagles, but feeding them was the real problem. Each working man needs at least 3 pounds of grain a day, and the next harvest wouldn't come until next summer. I'd need around 2 million pounds of food. The buying wasn't the hard part, transporting it all was. At least my game inventory could carry some, though it was already more than half full. I visited the skilled slaves in their courtyard. Kalaire announced me as their master, and they all knelt immediately. I told them to rise. I'd gotten completely comfortable with this role. Any modern moral qualms were long gone. They came from various kingdoms on the central continent, some formerly free citizens, others lifelong slaves. All had been through obedience training. Seasoned slaves cost more than untrained ones, but were much more manageable. Kalaire had also ordered 300 trained slave soldiers from Slave Bay at 6 gold eagles each. Not the strongest fighters, but disciplined and loyal, successfully brainwashed. He mentioned the most famous slave soldiers were called fearless iron warriors, raised on alchemical drugs from childhood, emotionless killing machines with no personal desires. Extremely loyal and disciplined, they'd fight to the death. One cost as much as a fine warhorse, and you had to buy them in units of 54 minimum since they fight in formation. The downside, they all dropped dead from organ failure after 7 or 8 years. I settled into the estate, while Kalaire handled wedding preparations. The next evening, Sarit and Hilter returned with my family. My mother Bala was 33, a decent-looking village woman, warm and kind. She cried when she saw me but seemed afraid to hug me. Probably the armor intimidated her. I didn't have real feelings for this woman who was technically a stranger to me, but I accepted the relationship. I took her hand and spoke gently. My little sister Jeannie was there too, 8 or 9 years old, red-brown hair, looking excited. The original Simon had been good to her, but when I smiled and reached to pat her head, she sensed something different about me and her smile faded slightly. The kid was sharp. For a split second I felt a cold impulse, but it passed instantly. She was just a little girl. Even if I were the real Simon, coming back from war would naturally create some distance. I told them their hard days were over and had Kylan look after them. Hilter's group had also brought along about 30 young men from the village hoping to make something of themselves under my command. I had them all settled in as well. The next day, Kalaire came back with everything ready for the wedding. We sat down privately, and he told me the ceremony would be at the Holy Chapel in White Gull Harbor. I asked about the 4,000 gold eagles. He'd only spent about 300 so far and brought the rest in a small wooden chest. When he opened it, golden coins gleamed everywhere. I called Ailey in to carry it to my room with strict orders. Nobody opens it. Nobody unfamiliar gets near it. Violators die. Before leaving, Kalaire hesitantly asked if his second son Reed could serve as my bodyguard. Reed was a bronze-level warrior, about 20 years old, currently leading mercenaries in the harbor. I paused, then asked about the loyalty of slave soldiers. Kalaire said train one stay loyal as long as you don't treat them too harshly, though they're not as absolute as the fearless iron warriors who'd kill themselves on command. Then he sweetened the deal. He'd give me an extra 100 trained slave soldiers on top of everything else. I agreed to take Reed on as a guard. Kalaire smiled, but I could tell he was starting to regret choosing me as his investment. He thought I was way too shrewd for a 16-year-old, and my soldiers' mysterious loyalty bothered him. He'd tried getting information from my militia, but couldn't crack any of them. I stashed the gold in my game inventory, and we headed to White Gull Harbor. The wedding was simple: new clothes, prayers and ceremony at the chapel with a priest, sign the marriage papers, done. No reception dinner. The guests were mostly Kalaire's merchant and mercenary contacts. One notable attendee was the steward of Marquis Val's city residence. The hall went silent when he announced he'd come on the Marquis's behalf. I thanked him warmly and asked him to convey my respects. Afterward, I kicked myself for not visiting the Marquis's residence personally. Even with the main family in Shisai, showing up would have been basic political courtesy. I was part of Val's faction now and needed to act like it. After the ceremony, I left Winnie's with Kylan at the trading company and took all my soldiers shopping for equipment. White Gull Harbor had excellent trade. I found a weapons merchant working for a southern earl. He showed me everything. Full knight plate armor with chain and padded lining, completely impenetrable to non-enchanted weapons, 120 gold eagles per set. Plate chain armor with iron brigandine was 60 gold eagles. Lighter options with studded iron chest plates and chain mail came cheaper. I planned carefully. Archers didn't need heavy armor. Studded leather plus a full-body single-layer chainmail would protect them without hurting their stamina for drawing bows. Archers are hard to train and valuable, so they deserve decent protection. I upgraded all my militia wearing leather armor to iron brigandine chest plates with full double-layer chainmail, plus matching iron helmets. Weapons came in 3 setups: sword and shield, spear and shield, or two-handed spear. The heavy infantry and cavalry already had good gear, so they just needed spare weapons. Light cavalry got iron brigandine with single-layer chainmail. For Ailey and Sarit, I planned bigger upgrades. Sarit would get plate chain armor since he focused on training and commanding. Ailey would get full knight plate armor. He was my frontline fighter. I ordered a set for myself too. 2 complete knight armor sets with horse armor came to 360 gold eagles. The total bill for everyone's equipment plus bows and arrows hit over 1,300 gold eagles. I hesitated, but weaponry is survival. Matt haggled the price down a bit, and I paid. The merchant threw in 500 iron-tipped arrows and 60 armor-piercing arrows as a bonus. After half a day, everyone was re-equipped. The whole force looked completely transformed, a proper elite unit. Ailey and I kept wearing our lighter brigandine for daily use though. Knight plate is twice as heavy and too cumbersome for walking around. On our way to the Windroom Trading Company, a huge man blocked our path and dropped to one knee. He was Keelong, captain of the Iron Bear mercenary band, and he wanted to swear loyalty to me. He was enormous, towered over everyone, carrying a two-handed sword and warhammer. He laid out his pitch clearly. He wanted to become nobility. His band had tensions with Kalaire's war spear mercenaries, and he offered me a golden deer statue as tribute. He was basically saying he could serve as a counterweight to Kalaire. Smart move. I told him I'd evaluate him first. He had 93 battle-tested warriors. I said I'd call on him when we departed. Then I quietly sent Mad to investigate the Iron Bear Band's reputation around town. At the Windroom Trading Company, Winnie's ran out to meet me. The place took up an entire street, over a dozen shops. Kalaire was genuinely capable, though ambition like his always needs watching. I told Winnie's to use the trading company's network to bulk purchase oxen, draft horses, and grain, mainly rye and barley, plus some wheat for us. She said Kalaire was already on it. We settled into the company headquarters, a large compound with plenty of rooms. I gave Winnie's 500 gold eagles from my inventory for purchasing supplies while I might be away. In our room, she helped me out of my armor. I lay down on the bed and she curled up against me. But instead of anything romantic, I quietly spent the next half hour upgrading all my soldiers' stats. Unlike my own upgrades that hit hard and fast, they seemed to take effect gradually without obvious discomfort. When I finished, my troops averaged around level 6. Light infantry all got iron bones to 5, high warrior level. Archers got iron bones to 4 with some points in running. Heavy infantry reached iron bones 8, bronze warrior strength. Heavy cavalry sat around 7 with extra riding skill. I saved Ailey and Sarit's new points for later, planning to develop them as knights. After finishing all that serious business, I turned my attention to the beautiful woman in my arms. Soon enough, soft sounds drifted from the room. After a few days at the Windroom Trading Company, slave ships finally arrived at the harbor. 57 ships carrying over 30,000 slaves from Slave Bay, flying their octopus flag banner. I grabbed 100 soldiers and rushed to the docks. Kalaire was already there with 70 or 80 of his men. Dozens of noble buyers and their representatives showed up quickly. Kalair had priority since he'd placed orders last year. His contact was a curly-haired man named Kamo with yellowish skin, clearly a different race from the kingdom's people, though still human. Kamo greeted Kalair warmly and confirmed his 500 servant soldiers and 300 trained soldiers were ready. I jumped into the conversation and placed my own order: 200 upper-grade serfs, 500 mid-grade serfs, and 500 fertile female slaves. Kalair introduced me as his son-in-law, Baron of Valor Territory. Kamo immediately became respectful. Prices had gone up from previous years. Upper serfs at 10 silver deer, mid-grade serfs and fertile women at 6 silver deer each. Kalair grumbled, but I accepted. The Shisai land rush had driven demand through the roof. Then I asked about skilled slaves. Kamo's eyes lit up. This year's stock was 10 times larger than normal because a massive war on the central continent had destroyed many cities, flooding the slave market with craftsmen. The prices were steep. A top-tier blacksmith cost 100 gold eagles. Master carpenters cost 36. Upper stonemasons 24. But these people would be invaluable for building my territory. I placed a huge order: 1 upper blacksmith, 3 mid-level blacksmiths, 20 blacksmith apprentices, 2 upper stonemasons, 10 mid-level, 100 entry-level, 1 master carpenter, 2 upper, 5 mid, 50 entry-level, smelting specialists, pharmacists, mining experts, brewers, weavers. I rattled off a long list covering every trade I could think of. Most I only bought 1 or 2 of, just to plant the seed of each craft in my territory. Kalair's frown deepened as I kept going. Kamo laughed and said I was nearly buying him out. The total came to 1,550 gold eagles. I had Mad bring over a chest containing 2,100 gold eagles, the extra for additional purchases. Kamo's eyes went greedy. He tried selling me premium pleasure slaves, beautiful sterilized women trained in 36 techniques. I told him I'd look, but wanted to complete the main delivery first. The slaves were brought off the ships and lined up on open ground. First came the soldiers, my 200 trained troops, plus Kalair's share. A formal transfer ceremony was held where Kamo handed me a black staff and declared me their sole master. The trained soldiers looked decent: average build, neat formation, leather armor, carrying spears. The servant soldiers were thinner and weaker, barely better than farmers who'd put down their hoes. They wore cloth armor with cheaper spears. They could probably handle unarmed serfs, but would struggle to take an actual village. I spent over 3 hours personally inspecting every slave before handing over the gold. Then Kamo lined up his pleasure slaves for me to browse. They were stunning. Every single one was gorgeous, curvy, seductive, with a mix of innocence and allure. The top-tier ones were as beautiful as Winnie's, some even more so. Prices matched the quality: 128 gold eagles for upper grade, 64 for mid, 24 for entry level, and 6 for regular servant girls. I swallowed hard. These women were breathtaking, and my body reacted immediately. My soldiers were staring with their mouths open, but I forced myself to look away. The money had to go toward building my territory. Kamo tried pushing the top-tier ones, saying some were illegitimate daughters of great nobles from the central continent, and this was a once-in-a-lifetime chance. I nearly broke, but held firm. Just 4 servant girls and 1 entry-level pleasure slave. That cost me 48 gold eagles total. The entry-level girl was still beautiful by normal standards: pale, smooth skin, lovely figure. I named her Chunlan. Meanwhile, Kalair casually bought 2 top-tier pleasure slaves. I stared at him. That was over 250 gold eagles on women. The man had serious money. After the deals were done, I organized registration at the local government office. Every slave had identifying marks: men branded on the face, women tattooed in pink on the back shoulder. The office just tracked where slaves went. By evening, nearly 3,000 slaves were crammed into the Windroom Company's back courtyard, sitting shoulder to shoulder. Women were separated, skilled slaves and soldiers got tents. Kylan and Winnie's had prepared 10 huge pots of rye porridge with butter and slaughtered a dozen sheep. Soldiers and skilled slaves got porridge plus a small piece of meat. Regular serfs got just porridge. The whole feeding went smoothly. The slaves were incredibly obedient, eating silently without any pushing or fighting. Slave-based training was impressive. As I was watching from a window, Chunlan came to tell me my bath was ready. She and the servant girls started removing my armor, struggling with the heavier pieces. Then Kalair showed up. He presented me with 6 more pleasure slaves, including the 2 top-tier ones he'd just bought, plus 4 entry-level ones. A gift, he said. I knew immediately what he was doing. He wanted to distract me with beautiful women, cloud my judgment. The smart move was to refuse. But looking at those two incredible women, I couldn't help myself. I accepted. After Claire left with a satisfied smile, the 6 women greeted me in voices like singing nightingales. My mind went soft for a moment. Then I snapped back. I spent my latest upgrade point on resistance. A cool wave washed through my brain and body. When I looked at the women again, that overwhelming pull had faded to something manageable. I sent them all away to find rooms with Chunlan. I had to master this weakness. Beauty is seasoning, not sustenance. If I couldn't control this, I'd never build anything great. As for Claire, buying those women just to give them away without flinching, I raised his threat level in my mind another notch. A commoner who'd built an empire through that kind of self-control was someone to watch very carefully. After a night with Winnie's, we slept in late and woke up starving. Chunlan brought us a lavish breakfast. Roast lamb leg, beef steak, roast fish, cheese, butter, white bread, vegetable soup, and sliced apples. A meal like this was luxurious even for many barons. We demolished everything. Winnie's ate a surprising amount herself. I called in Ailey, Sarit, and Claire for a meeting. Ailey reported the slaves had been perfectly behaved overnight. Not a single escape attempt. He'd barely slept worrying about it for nothing. Claire gave me the supply numbers. 350 ox carts, 200 horse carts, 30,000 bushels of rye, 12,000 barley, 3,000 wheat, 2,000 black beans. Total cost, 382 gold eagles. I couldn't help thinking that all that grain and livestock cost less than 3 top-tier pleasure slaves. We had enough food to reach Valor territory. Between wild berries, game hunting, and traveling merchants, we wouldn't starve even after arriving. Plus, my game inventory could secretly hold a year's worth of food for 3,000 people. Claire said he'd stay in White Gull Harbor to run the trading company and keep buying supplies for me. His son Reed would come with me, bringing 100 trained soldiers and 500 servant soldiers. I told Claire that when Valor territory was developed, I'd gift him an estate. And if Reed proved loyal, I'd make him a knight. Then I had Reed come in for the ceremony. Reed knelt, offered his sword, and swore loyalty. I drew my blade and named him an honorary knight. When he appeared in my troop roster, his loyalty was only 81. Not great. I caught a flash of disappointment in Claire's eyes. He'd wanted Reed to get a landed knight title, not just an honorary one. I could practically hear him regretting his investment in me. But I wasn't giving away land to someone with 81 loyalty. The 200 trained soldiers from Kamo had also appeared in my roster after the transfer ceremony. Every single one at full loyalty. Whatever Slave Bay did to these people was terrifyingly effective. My total military force was now over 300. I spent the rest of the day checking on the slaves, then retreated to read. Winnie's had bought 3 noble-only books, A History of the Eagle Kingdom, A Guide to Heraldic Crests, and the travel journal of a famous southern duke. I started with the travel journal to quickly learn about the kingdom's different regions. Winnie's curled up against me, and we read together. Later, a maid knocked. The city tailor had delivered our finished family crest and banners. Things were coming together. Tomorrow at sunrise, we'd head for Valor territory. The maid brought in the finished family crest and banner. Winnie's unfolded the flag, sun and moon in red on a yellow background, clean and simple. The materials and craftsmanship were solid. She played with a crest pin, holding it against her chest, and then mine, beaming the whole time. I went back to reading. After a light afternoon snack of honey wheat cakes with cream, I suited up in armor and went to inspect the preparations. The back courtyard was packed wall to wall with people. Ailey and the others had organized everything well. Each of my personal soldiers supervised 10 trained slave troops, who in turn managed 100 serfs. 20 light infantry and 5 longbowmen guarded the valuable skilled slaves. Sarit led a mobile cavalry unit of about 15 light riders. I still had nearly 60 guards around me personally, plus Reed's 600 slave soldiers for numbers, and Keelong's Iron Bear mercenary band handling the rear. Matt had checked their reputation, decent and reliable, though their relationship with Claire's war spear band was cool. Around 3 in the afternoon, our column of 3,000 people marched out of White Gull Harbor toward the Wind Room estate. 6 people per row, the line stretched hundreds of meters. Quite a sight. We arrived at dusk. The estate's fields had been harvested and cleared. 500 or 600 ox carts and horse carts were lined up, loaded with grain. Hundreds of sheep grazed in a fenced area. 20-some pots were already cooking. The food hierarchy was strict. Serfs got one bowl of rye porridge. Slave soldiers got rye porridge plus a big spoonful of butter. High-value skilled slaves like blacksmiths got barley porridge with butter and even roast mutton. My personal soldiers ate properly: black bread, butter, potato soup, roast lamb. Winnie's and I had the best of everything: roast lamb chops, white bread, vegetable soup, cheese, over a dozen dishes. After dinner, I inspected the camp, set up the night watch, and went to bed. No entertainment available except making babies. At dawn, I woke to colored light filtering through glass windows. The Eagle Kingdom could make glass. Not perfectly clear, small panes in various colors, but decent. I'd bought 2 glass-making slaves among my craftsmen. Winnie's was still sleeping on my chest like a cat. I held her waist and dozed off again. When I woke properly, it was about 7:30. Time to move. I slapped her on the rear to wake her up. She complained her legs were still weak from last night. I joked she wasn't satisfied yet. She threw up her hands and cried she was stuffed, completely full. We laughed, got dressed, ate a big breakfast, and I suited up in heavy armor. Time to head for Valor territory. Mad reported everyone had eaten. Before we set off, I gave him an important order. All drinking water had to be boiled first and stored in barrels. No one drinks unboiled water. It causes diarrhea. He looked confused but obeyed. These people didn't understand why, but I knew this one small change could save many slaves from dying. Every slave cost real money. Winnie's rode in her fancy carriage while I took my warhorse. We headed out, 3,000 people, a column stretching over 200 meters. Nobody dared bother a group this size. The main challenge was logistics, especially water. We had to camp near rivers or streams every night, and boiling water for everyone added a lot of work. A village chief from Waterwell village came asking for help with something. I turned him down. Let the local lord deal with it. I wasn't running a charity. Over the next month, we traveled steadily along the road without incident. I avoided trouble, and trouble avoided us. But once we hit the Green Valley Road, things got rougher. More forests, valleys, and dangerous wildlife. We saw ghouls and wandering corpses a few times. One village reported a vampire had killed several people. I didn't care about their problems, but I tightened up our formation. Vampires in this world aren't that terrifying. They can use some blood magic, but only the most powerful ones can transform into bats, and those stay in the far western wilderness. The ones inland are like rats, hiding in dense forests, picking off stragglers. One morning, Ailey told me a slave had been found dead outside camp with all his blood drained. He'd probably gone out to urinate alone at night. I was furious. I ordered that nobody goes anywhere alone at night. Bathroom trips require groups of at least 10 with someone keeping watch. Chasing a vampire through unfamiliar forest wasn't realistic. Winnie's knew a tracking spell that reveals dark creatures within 30 meters, so if we caught it in the act, we'd have a chance. 2 days later, Sarit reported another nighttime attack. They'd fought someone off, but couldn't catch them. Probably the same vampire. I asked if vampires were afraid of garlic. Winnie said they disliked the smell, but it doesn't actually hurt them. I sent Mad to the nearest town to buy garlic and more grain. He came back with several strings of garlic and dozens of wagons of food from Greystone Town. He said every house there had garlic hanging outside. A vampire had been terrorizing the area for a month. The local lord was hiring the Blade Edge Society to hunt it down. Garlic prices had skyrocketed. What he bought cost 3 silver deer. I had the garlic distributed to every night guard and hung on outer tents. I also ordered it crushed and mixed into the evening porridge. If this vampire kept following us, I'd have to set up a nighttime ambush with Winnie's and kill it myself. My magic had improved a lot during the journey. I'd learned several small spells beyond Mage Hand, though I still couldn't inscribe runes in my mental space for instant casting. That takes serious time. Winnie's had studied magic for nearly 10 years and only managed to inscribe 1 spell. The garlic worked. No more vampire attacks that night. Over the next few days, things stayed calm. I held a group dinner with all my key people: Ailey, Sarit, Reed, Keelong, Mad, Kylan, and Yaman. We roasted a big goat, and everyone ate well. They all flattered me, which I didn't mind. I told them to pick up the pace and get out of this region quickly. I realized I should do this kind of bonding more often. As a leader, I'd been too distant. On the 7th evening, a man from the Blade Edge Society showed up. He was a silver hunter named Aurid, wearing a black hooded robe. He said he'd been tracking a group of 5 to 8 vampires, and they'd been circling our camp for several nights. The garlic was keeping them at bay, but they might follow us all the way to Valor territory. That would be a nightmare. They could hide in the forests and hills, and vampires can turn humans, so their numbers would keep growing, if not wiped out. He needed 50 elite soldiers to help him hunt them down. I agreed, but demanded half the loot. I gave the job to Keelong. If he handled it well, I'd make him an honorary knight. He was thrilled and left with his 90-some mercenaries plus the hunter. The next morning, Keelong hadn't returned by 9. I frowned but ordered the march to continue. I wasn't wasting time waiting. Days passed, and his band still didn't catch up. I worried a little but didn't lose sleep over it. They weren't my core troops. The vampire attacks had stopped completely after they left, so Howard was probably keeping the vampires busy at least. Over the following weeks, I kept studying magic with Winnie's and swordsmanship with Ailey. I was close to leveling up again, planning to put the next point into battle aura for the lifespan extension. We passed through Long Forest Town briefly, bought some livestock, potatoes, and grain. Over the journey, we stopped at 7 or 8 towns for iron farming tools and a cart of raw iron ingots. 3 nobles invited me into their castles. I politely declined every time. No social visits until I had an heir. Keelong's name stayed in my troop roster, so he was alive. Probably stuck dealing with complications rather than having abandoned me. We lost only about a dozen slaves on the entire 3-month journey. Matt had noticed that the boiled water order dramatically reduced stomach illness. He didn't understand why. He figured it was some kind of magic ritual. Then one sunny afternoon, we finally arrived at Valor territory. "We're back, my lord," Ailey said excitedly. Everyone was exhausted from the long march. I smiled and called for Yaman. It was time for the engineer to earn his keep. I told him to scout for the perfect location to build a castle and also figure out where we should set up temporary camp. He was confident he could handle it. I assigned Sarit with 10 light cavalry to escort and protect Yaman while he surveyed the land. The real work was about to begin. By evening, Yaman had picked a temporary camp location. South was open plains, north had rolling hills, a river ran along the east, and thick forest stretched to the west. He recommended building the castle on a raised, flat-topped slope nearby, solid ground, good elevation for defense, with farmland, water, and timber all within reach. I approved, but told him to keep scouting since we hadn't explored the whole territory yet. 3,000 people started setting up tents around the hill. Watching them all bustling around, I felt satisfied. My start was strong thanks to Kalaire's investment. Even if few free citizens came for years, I had enough slaves to manage. Honestly, slaves were more useful than free citizens in some ways. Everything slaves produce belongs to me. Free citizens pay taxes, but the crown takes 20%, the church wants a cut, and only what's left is mine. Some greedy lords had pushed taxes to 80% in the past, driving people to become bandits. A king eventually capped it at 50%. To celebrate arriving, I doubled everyone's food rations and roasted 10 goats. All soldiers got roast meat. Slave soldiers and skilled slaves got small pieces. Regular serfs just watched hungrily. While I was tearing into a lamb leg, Ailey came overlooking tents. Dog-headed beast folk had been spotted in the western forest, watching our camp. I'd almost forgotten, Shisai still had roaming beast men. I told Ailey to eat first and sent Sarit to organize patrols. Tomorrow we'd need to build a wooden fort. I put Yaman in charge of construction with full command over the serfs and carpenters. The next morning I woke in full armor. No walls around us meant zero sense of security. The camp was already alive with serfs fetching water, gathering firewood, and cooking. Nobody had to be told, they just found work. Most of them were actually smiling. Apparently, I was a kind master by local standards. Sarit reported the dogheads had harassed the camp all night and only retreated at dawn. I sent him to sleep and called Reed. His loyalty had climbed to the 90s, usable now. I ordered him to take his forces into the forest for guard duty while we built the fort. Kill any dogheads on sight. He had 600 slave soldiers plus a dozen well-armored elite warriors from the War Spear Band, the second strongest force in Valor territory after mine. But I wasn't worried about him having too many troops. My personal soldiers were far superior. Heavy infantry and cavalry at high bronze warrior level, light troops all at mid or high warrior strength. His slave soldiers couldn't compare. I called Kylan next and put her in charge of all medical personnel, including the slave doctors I'd bought. She'd handle treating everyone, slaves, soldiers, and us. Winnie showed up with the servant girls carrying breakfast to my location. She'd been learning a seductive voice from the pleasure slaves. I laughed and told her she was the lady of the house. Dignified and commanding suited her better. She immediately switched to a mature, confident tone. I smiled and let it go. I invited Kylan to sit and eat with us. She stammered that she'd already eaten, clearly flustered by the invitation. After breakfast, I slapped Kylan on the rear when she lied about having already eaten. She yelped and blushed, glancing nervously at Winnie's. But Winnie's just rolled her eyes and told her to sit down. She'd accepted it. The truth was, I needed Kylan. She was the perfect candidate for chief mage, and I couldn't let talent like that slip away. Plus, Winnie's and the two top-tier pleasure slaves were already more than I could handle physically. My stamina needed work. After Kylan left shyly, Winnie's got a bit jealous. I told her straight, the Holland family needed heirs desperately. Legitimate sons, illegitimate sons, all of them. Our family was dangerously thin. It was actually her responsibility to help find fertile women for me. She'd been well-educated enough to understand noble family politics. She pouted but accepted it. Being a merchant's daughter, she didn't have the backing to push back hard. Reed's 600 soldiers were nothing compared to my 100-plus elite guards, so her brother couldn't give her real leverage either. I kissed her and smoothed things over, then went to inspect the territory. Yaman had the serfs chopping trees in the forest. Mad was directing others to clear and flatten land. I noticed too many people were on ground-clearing duty, so I split them up, sent Mad with several hundred serfs and 100 oxen to start breaking farmland, and put Sild, a master spearman with 91 weapon skill, in charge of the camp construction. Among my people, Mad was the smartest manager, followed by Yaman. Kylan and Sarit were sharp too. Ali had the best combat stats, but average brains. At least he wouldn't fall for obvious traps. 3 days passed. Dogheads came every night, but Reed's forces killed dozens, and they calmed down. There had to be a settlement nearby. I'd deal with it once we were established. The wooden fort was finished, triple-layered log walls with watchtowers every 50 meters. Inside stood 400 to 500 simple wooden huts, each about 7 or 8 square meters, sleeping 5 or 6 serfs on floor mats. My soldiers got private rooms. The master carpenter built me a luxurious cabin of 50 or 60 square meters with carved decorations. Mad had cleared over 3,000 acres of farmland southwest of the fort using up to 1,000 serfs and 200 oxen at peak. The land was ready but not yet planted. On the third morning, I woke up next to Kylan. She'd come to my bed easily, barely needed convincing. I told her I sensed magical talent in her and gave her the Earth Meditation Scroll to study. She couldn't read, so I'd teach her. She was happy but worried about Winnie's. I told her I was in charge of Valor territory and she'd be fine. Just don't provoke Winnie's and respect the hierarchy. She agreed sweetly. At breakfast, Ailey reported ghouls in the western forest and jackalmen from the northern hills, though Sarit's cavalry had chased them off. The dogheads had actually stopped coming for 2 days. I ordered Yaman to build a watchtower outpost on the northern hills with a garrison of about 15 men. If anything major happened, they'd signal with smoke. I invited Ailey to eat breakfast with me. Over roast fish, white bread, and wheat porridge, we discussed the beastmen problem. Too many were lurking nearby. Serfs couldn't farm safely without a military sweep. After eating, I suited up in heavy armor and took all my cavalry out to inspect the territory. We rode to the farmland first. Nearly 1,000 serfs and over 200 oxen were working steadily, clearing about 2,000 acres per day. The soil was excellent, dark yellowish-black, mostly upper-grade farmland, with some patches reaching top quality. The fields were impressively organized, neat, level, with well-planned footpaths between plots. I asked Mad who planned it all. He admitted it wasn't him, but a serf named Charles. I had Charles and 4 other skilled farming serfs brought over. They arrived terrified, kneeling and trembling. Nobles can kill slaves on a whim here. Charles turned out to be about 40, with sharp eyes unlike typical serfs. He'd studied 2 years at an agricultural academy in the Rock Kingdom before being captured and sold. Despite his knowledge, he'd only been classified as an upper-grade serf because farming expertise isn't considered a special skill. I promoted all 5 on the spot, no more field work. They'd serve under Mad as planning supervisors, guiding the other serfs. I doubled their food rations and allowed them meat once a month. Charles was overjoyed, bowing repeatedly. I told Mad to keep clearing land but start planting within 7 days or we'd miss the season and have no harvest next year. Then I took the cavalry north into the hills. The terrain was rough, thick brush and grass, impossible to gallop through. From a ridge at noon, we spotted over 100 dogheads to the northwest. I left them alone for now. We pushed north to the border of Valor territory. After 3 hours through natural valleys between hills, we reached another plain. According to my map, this was roughly the boundary. The territory just north was called Green Plains, but the border between us was vague. The map wasn't detailed enough to draw precise lines. In practice, whoever occupied disputed land first owned it. Strength determined borders. I rode north across the plain for half an hour without seeing a soul. The Green Plains Lord apparently hadn't arrived yet. Studying the map, I formed a plan. The southern edge of Green Plains overlapped with our northern hills in an ambiguous zone. I could push Valor Territory's border north by a dozen miles or so. We rode back along the river, much easier than the hills, and reached camp by dusk. I decided to station Reed in that disputed northern area. I'd grant him that land as his knight's territory. Since no boundary markers existed yet, the border was flexible. Whoever held the ground held the claim. I couldn't spare my own elite troops, but Reed had enough men to potentially hold the position. Over dinner, roast chicken, fish, white bread, cheese, and vegetable soup made from edible wild plants. I told Winnie's about the northern border situation. She agreed we should act fast before the Green Plains Baron had the same idea. I floated the plan to give Reed that borderland. But then I realized I still needed his 500 servant soldiers to guard our serfs and fields. Winnie's jumped in and offered to talk to her brother about handing over most of his slave troops. We settled on Reed, keeping 200 and giving us 300. That evening we had the pleasure slaves perform some music and dance for entertainment. Around 10, I sent them away and spent the night with Winnie's. She should be getting pregnant by now. We'd been at it plenty. The next morning, right on schedule, Reed showed up asking to see me. He nervously offered to donate for 100 servant soldiers, saying he couldn't afford to feed them as a landless knight. Winnie's had clearly talked to him, though he gave me an extra 100 beyond what we'd discussed. I pretended to think it over, then accepted and told him to follow me. I had land for him. We rode north with all the cavalry, reaching the border area in a few hours. Still empty, not a soul in sight. I marked boundaries in several directions, using the river as the natural eastern border. I named it Windroom Village and granted it to Reed as his knight's territory. Roughly 50 square kilometers, mostly plains with some forest on the west side. In the kingdom's interior, that would be a full baron's worth of land. Reed was overwhelmed. He dropped to one knee, face flushed red, and swore his loyalty passionately. Even Ailey and Sarit looked jealous, though Sarit was sharp enough to realize this land came with inevitable border disputes. It was partly a gift, partly a hot potato. I told Reed to get support from his father Kalair to build a fortress quickly that would secure his claim. He should also pick a family name and crest and report it to Winnie's. His loyalty jumped straight to 100. He might not even be on the same page as his father anymore. I'd kept a strip of about 2,000 acres of riverfront plain on the eastern side of the hills as my own direct territory. That river road was the easiest route to my core area, and I need a fortress passage there eventually. We got back after dark. Winnie's was waiting with dinner. She thanked me warmly for taking care of her brother. Then she mentioned something I'd overlooked. Some of my soldiers had been harassing female slaves. I cursed myself for not thinking of it sooner. I decided to lend each soldier a female slave temporarily, with permanent ownership as a reward for future merit. Ailey and Sarit would get theirs outright. Mad and Yaman needed women too. I asked Winnie's if she knew any merchant daughters she could introduce to my officers. She said she had some old contacts and would write letters when her father's next trade caravan arrived. I woke at dawn feeling rested. No woman last night meant early sleep and a clear head. I watched Winnie sleeping, thought about my plans, then got up when the sky brightened. After breakfast, I saw Reed off. He had 100 trained soldiers, 100 servant soldiers, and about 15 armored elite guards. I didn't give him any serfs, but provided 3 months' worth of grain. I told him if the Green Plains Baron gave him too much trouble, I'd bring my full army to help beat them together. He swore to hold the border and rode north. 5 of his riders split off heading south, probably going to Kalair for support. That was fine. The Windroom Trading Company was part of my power base anyway. Next came the important business, distributing women to my soldiers. I called Ailey, Sarit, Mad, and Yaman together and told them to pick 2 female slaves each for personal service. They were embarrassed for about half a second, then eagerly grateful. I could tell this had been building. Wait too long, and resentment would follow. Winnie's lined up all 500 fertile female slaves in front of the hall. After months of decent feeding, some had filled out nicely, fair skin, good figures. Not as pretty as Winnie's or the pleasure slaves, but perfectly fine for companionship and children. My 4 officers picked the 8 best-looking ones. Men's taste is remarkably consistent. The rest of my guards were practically vibrating with anticipation. I teased them. They hadn't earned any real merit yet. Then I offered a compromise. Each man could borrow 1 female slave, and if they distinguished themselves in the future, the woman would become theirs permanently. Never give everything at once, or you'll run out of rewards. To keep things fair, I had them all blindfolded. Grab whoever you catch, beautiful or plain, that's your luck. They loved it. The whole event turned into a hilarious scramble. Afterward, I warned them sternly. These women are borrowed property. Anyone who damages them loses their head. They all acknowledged loudly, then scattered to their private cabins with their new companions. Some waited for nighttime. Others closed their doors immediately. The next day I rode south to check the other border. After several hours we crossed a small river, passed some hills, and reached the boundary with fearless territory. That barony was smaller than mine, about 500 square kilometers, but almost entirely flat plains with better farming potential. Looking at those endless fields, I felt genuine greed. But the Eagle Kingdom has rules. You can only gain land through military merit, marriage inheritance, or a once-a-year land swap of roughly equal value. We spotted the fearless Baron's camp in the distance, a small wooden fort with 5 watchtowers, one flying a banner with a crest. I watched from afar, but didn't approach. I had no idea how many men he had. Better to come back another day with more soldiers and make a proper visit. I returned to camp at dusk. The plains looked beautiful, golden red light across thousands of acres of freshly cleared farmland, serfs working with oxen. The sheep and goat pens had been set up too, though we didn't have enough livestock for real meat production. Hunting only brought in small game like wild chickens. But my secret grain reserves could feed 3,000 people for a year, and the visible wagon supplies would last 3 months. Next year's harvest should make us self-sufficient. Yaman reported finding limestone in the northern hills, great for making morite. He knew how to process it, which saved me the trouble. I spent the remaining time studying heraldry, which has an absurd number of crests to memorize. Then Sarit announced that Keelong had arrived. That surprised me. I'd nearly forgotten about him and his mercenaries. I had Ailey bring 9 heavy infantry into the hall before letting Keelong in. Couldn't be too careful. Keelong marched in and knelt, announcing he'd completed his mission and had treasure to present. 2 of his men opened a long chest. Inside was a pile of gold and silver, gold eagles, silver deer, foreign coins, gold nuggets, even raw or with visible gold. On top sat a blood-red leather book labeled Book of Blood. Below it was a crimson staff about 1.60 meters long, topped with a scarlet gemstone. When Winnie's arrived and saw the contents, she gasped. The Book of Blood and Crimson Staff belonged to Viscount-level vampires or higher. Both contained vampire-exclusive magic, useless to humans, though the materials had some recovery value. She immediately asked if the vampire clan had been completely wiped out. If not, survivors would come looking for these items. Keelong launched into a dramatic story about hunting vampires with Alred the Silver Hunter. It sounded like an adventure novel, heroic deeds, foiling some vampire viscount's conspiracy. But he never actually explained what the conspiracy was. The whole thing felt foggy. He'd lost over half his men. Only 31 left from 93. Alred had apparently gone off on another contract. I kept my expression calm, but something felt wrong. I told Keelong I needed to verify no vampires had infiltrated his group. I had 300 soldiers surround the hall with weapons drawn. His mercenaries raised their own weapons defensively, looking angry and scared, until they heard my reasoning. Then they relaxed slightly. I made them each eat a head of raw garlic. Keelong swallowed his without hesitation. His men followed, though some choked and coughed. Nobody had any unusual reaction. That proved there were no low or mid-level vampires among them. But higher-level vampires might not react to garlic at all. The bigger concern was Keelong's loyalty, stuck at 75 in my roster. Something was off with this man, and I couldn't figure out what. I pulled out a silver deer coin and had each of Keelong's men hold it for a while. Silver is supposed to burn vampires. Everyone passed, no reactions. But I wasn't satisfied. Keelong's loyalty was stuck at 75 and hadn't dropped even after I'd openly shown distrust. That meant he'd had ulterior motives from the very start. My leadership skill can't increase loyalty for someone who genuinely harbors ill intent. Winnie's offered to use a drop of holy demon-slaying water. One drop could break any dark creature's disguise. I told Keelong that if he passed this test, I'd make him a landed knight with his own territory. A generous enough offer that he'd have no reason to refuse. His face went red. He exploded, shouting about how he'd risked his life and lost half his men for my mission, demanding to know why I didn't trust him. Ailey roared at him to watch his mouth. Every weapon in the room came up. I stayed calm and said if he wasn't a vampire, the holy water couldn't hurt him. Just hold one drop and it's over. Then he gets his knighthood. He refused. He demanded to leave instead. So you have been turned into a vampire, I said plainly. Winnie's raised her staff and activated Guardian Aura, a golden circle of light covering about 6 meters around us. Then something unexpected happened. One of Keelong's own men, a tall swordsman, called out to him, saying the holy water was harmless and he should just take the test and become a noble. Other mercenaries agreed and started backing away from Keelong. Keelong snapped. His eyes turned blood red. He screamed that everyone else was the real vampire, then pointed at his deputy Toma and shouted that he was one too. Toma cursed, and the remaining mercenaries immediately distanced themselves from both of them. 2 vampires, trapped in the middle of my army. I asked who'd sent them to infiltrate my forces. The chest of treasure was probably meant to make Keelong's story believable. You can't claim to have raided a vampire lair without bringing back loot. Toma dropped to his knees and begged to confess in exchange for his life. But before he could speak, Keelong swung his great sword and cleanly beheaded him. Then Keelong's voice changed completely, deeper, colder. His face went white as bone, eyes glowing red. A more powerful vampire was controlling his body remotely. Winnie's recognized the technique. Only Viscount-level vampires or higher could do this. The voice demanded I return the Book of Blood and the Crimson Staff. In exchange, this vampire, Earl, would leave Valor territory alone and infiltrate somewhere else in Shisai. I wanted to just farm in peace. This was ridiculous. But I thought for half a second and gave my order. Kill him. Sarit fired an arrow dipped in holy water into Keelong's leg. Blue smoke erupted from the wound, and he screamed something inhuman. The mercenaries swarmed him, spears thrusting, swords hacking, warhammers crushing. Even a gold-level warrior can't fight off that many attackers. He was torn apart in seconds. The tall swordsman took his head. "What's your name?" I asked him. "Shelt, my lord," he said, kneeling. I had the remaining mercenaries tested with holy water one by one. All human. Only Keelong and Toma had been turned. Shelt explained what had happened during the vampire hunt. They'd tracked the creatures to a mountain cave. Only about 15 men went inside, including Keelong and Toma. Only those 2 and the silver hunter Alred came back out. Everyone who entered the cave died, except the 2 who'd been secretly converted. The whole thing had been a setup. The vampire Viscount let Keelong win, turned him, loaded him with treasure and artifacts, and sent him back to infiltrate my territory. Alred the hunter had conveniently disappeared afterward. From what the mercenaries described, Keelong's group had been overwhelmed in that cave. The silver hunter Alred had probably been turned into a vampire too. I drew my sword and offered Shelt the honorary knight title for taking Keelong's head. He knelt and accepted eagerly. I performed the ceremony right there. The other mercenaries watched enviously. Even an honorary knighthood was a foot in the door to nobility, with steady pay and no more wandering for dangerous contracts. I had Ailey arrange housing for the mercenaries and quietly keep them under watch. The hall was a bloody mess and needed cleaning. Winnie's reminded me to burn the vampire bodies. Their ashes had some value as alchemy ingredients. I told Mylon to handle it. Back in the bedroom, I asked Winnie's how dangerous these vampires really were. She said even a vampire earl couldn't survive being mobbed by dozens of high-level warriors. They were probably targeting Shisai because it was newly settled and the lords were weak. Still a headache. I decided to send the Book of Blood and Crimson Staff to Marquis Val as a gift. Let the Marquis deal with the vampire problem. He had the resources for it. Keeping those items would only attract trouble I couldn't handle. They were worth over 1,000 gold eagles, but I had no way to safely sell or use them, and vampires would keep coming after them. The next morning, I had Winnie's write a formal letter to the Marquis describing how I destroyed a vampire nest and was presenting the captured artifacts. Then I called Sheldon and gave him the mission. Take all 30 mercenaries on fast horses and deliver the chest to the Marquis' camp, following the river road north. I told him a trick: carry the Book of Blood and Crimson Staff visibly on top of the chest when leaving, so any watching vampires would see the items going with them. Only put everything inside the box after a few miles. That way the vampires would follow the delivery party instead of lingering around my territory. I gave him the sealed letter, a Holland family crest badge, and some travel money. Then I remembered something important. I had Mylon take some silver deer coins to the blacksmith and melt them into 10 iron swords. Silver-laced blades would actually hurt vampires. Schult would take 5 of those swords before departing. After he left, breakfast arrived. The usual spread of roast chicken, fish, soup, white bread, butter, and cheese. I sent for Winnie's and Kylan to join me. One of the top-tier pleasure slaves went to fetch them, swaying her hips as she walked out. I watched the whole way and shook my head. Those women were dangerously tempting. Winnie's and Kylan both came to breakfast, and they brought my mother Bala and sister Jeannie too. Mother got emotional, saying she'd never lived so well, white bread every day. Jeannie asked excitedly what food there'd be. She was a bit more reserved than the original Simon's memory suggested, but still sweet. I told her there'd be roast lamb and fish. Kylan sat with us, behaving perfectly. Mother smiled at her warmly. Winnie's kept her expression neutral, no hostility. Everyone ate together pleasantly, though nobody's table manners were good. Even Winnie's wouldn't pass at a proper noble dinner. I told her to have Claire find us an etiquette teacher. After breakfast, I suited up in heavy armor and ordered Ailey to gather 80 personal guards and 100 trained slave soldiers. Anyone without a horse would ride a draft horse. We were heading south. Within half an hour, 180 soldiers were assembled, probably the most impressive force among the nearby barons. Most newly appointed ones couldn't even scrape together 100 armored men. We rode south to the small river I'd scouted before. What I saw made my blood boil. Yesterday, this was empty wilderness. Now there was a small camp with a watchtower flying the fearless territory baron's flag. Looking at my map, this spot was completely inside Valor territory, not even close to the border. They'd grabbed nearly 100 square kilometers of my land. Even I hadn't pushed boundaries that far up north. I wanted to draw my sword right then, but held back for a moment. Ask them who they are, I said coldly. Ailey rode forward and shouted the question. A voice from inside claimed to be Knight Rick of Baron Hera's fearless territory and demanded we leave their land. That was it. I snapped. Kill them. I drew my sword and pointed forward. No negotiations. In this untamed frontier, border disputes are settled by force. This Rick was just a freshly appointed knight. Killing him wouldn't cause real problems. And if nobody survived to complain, there'd be no consequences at all. My soldiers charged with practiced coordination, infantry with shields forward, cavalry flanking, archers providing cover from behind. Far more professional than a village brawl. The people inside panicked. Most were farmers who'd barely put down their hoes. Their camp was a joke, single-layer log walls that my heavy infantry could kick over. Their few archers had weak bows with poor arrows that just thudded into our shields before being shot dead by my longbowmen. Within moments, my soldiers reached the walls and literally kicked them down. Screaming erupted from inside. My men went in slashing and stabbing, killed more than half in seconds. Spare those who surrender, I said calmly. My guards bellowed the order. 15 survivors dropped to their knees. Knight Rick had hidden in the back and was dragged out unharmed, tossed on the ground in front of my horse. I questioned the captured Knight Rick. He turned white and stammered that they'd made a mistake about the border. I asked how many soldiers Baron Hera had. Only 37 total, 7 just died, leaving 30. Pathetic. Rick told me Hera was from the Polk family, a new noble house backed by Marquis Val. Hera's father had died protecting the Marquis, same as my uncle. But unlike me, Hera hadn't married a merchant's daughter. He'd arranged to wed the 6th daughter of a viscount from Maple Leaf territory up north. No written contract yet, just verbal agreement. I thought to myself, what an idiot. That viscount would swallow him whole within a few years. And then I'd have a powerful neighbor on my southern border instead of this weakling. Not good. Rick was Hera's cousin. The whole Polk clan had come to develop the territory, 2 brothers, 1 younger brother, 6 cousins, 2 uncles, all with their families. Maybe 100 people total, and they dared to grab land? Bold but stupid. I told Rick to take me to his baron. I wanted compensation. Between nobles, prisoners are usually ransomed, not killed. Only when someone truly can't pay do things get ugly. I had the surviving captives kept as slaves and marched my army south. We crossed the river and reached Hera's camp in under 2 hours. It was better built than Rick's outpost, but nothing compared to what Yaman could build. Farmers outside the walls spotted us and ran inside when the alarm bell rang. We rode up slowly, Mylon carrying my sun and moon banner high. Rick walked in front, hands bound, rope around his neck, dragged by a heavy cavalryman. A deliberately humiliating display. Ailey bellowed our demands. 500 gold eagles in compensation for invading our territory, plus 100 gold eagles to ransom Knight Rick. Pay up or we'd attack and kill everyone. I could see through the walls that Baron Hera was a young man, maybe 20, wearing cheap armor, worse than what my light infantry wore. He was panicking. His advisor, an old man in a patched black robe named Ralt, had some sense. He'd once worked collecting taxes for a baron, but even he was sweating. Someone else climbed the watchtower, a muscular older man, Hera's uncle, a former blacksmith. He roared about wanting to fight, saying his warhammer was thirsty. Hera told him to come look for himself. The uncle took one good look at my army, over 150 armored professionals in perfect formation, and went quiet immediately. We can't possibly pay that much, he said, deflated. They were broke. Hera probably had 50 or 60 gold eagles total. My demand was actually standard, not excessive at all. But for this family of near-paupers, it might as well have been 1,000,000. Ailey shouted they had 2 hours to respond or we'd attack. Silence from inside. I wasn't rushing. Their walls were sturdier than Rick's outpost, so I had Ailey take 30 men to chop trees and build battering rams, simple ones with protective roofs to block arrows. They built 2 in about an hour, each needing 10 men to operate. Good enough for a wooden fort. My soldiers ate black bread and water while we waited. They fed black beans to the warhorses. Everyone checked their weapons. The deadline was approaching. Inside, Baron Hera was sweating with fear. His advisor Ralt, an old man in a patched black robe who'd once worked as a tax collector for another baron, gave him 2 options. First, propose a marriage alliance with me, offering to make one of my family members a landed knight on Fearless Territory's northern border. Second, lure me inside and kill me with a heavy crossbow, hoping my army would scatter. The family argued among themselves. Some favored alliance, others wanted to kill me. Hera chose assassination. He promised Ralt a knighthood if it worked. They raised a white flag and sent Ralt out. He walked up to my position and made the alliance pitch. Hera would marry someone from my family and grant a family member a knight's territory along the northern border. Peaceful coexistence against the beast men. I smiled. This was actually an opportunity, not for peace, but for future territorial claims. In the Eagle Kingdom, marrying off a woman gives her family a weak claim over the husband's territory. I agreed, but demanded we sign the marriage document immediately, not a contract, but an actual marriage certificate. I said I had a sister named Jeannie, 10 years old. I'd send her in a few days for the wedding. I wasn't actually planning to hand over my sister. I had other calculations in mind. Ralt ran back inside, returned quickly confirming Hera agreed. I ordered the gates opened. Ailey, bring the guards inside with me. Mylon, surround the fort with cavalry and trained soldiers. My men poured through the gates like a flood, seizing every high point and strategic position. Our archers replaced theirs on the watchtowers. Hera's people went pale with terror. A table was brought out. Hera stood there looking lost. Ralt had to remind him to fetch the sheepskin paper, Lord's seal, and sealing wax. All expensive items he kept locked up. I sent 4 soldiers to follow Ralt when he went to get them. Hera's face changed. He looked anxious for a moment, then deflated completely. Whatever trap he'd been planning was now impossible with my soldiers controlling everything inside. I dictated clearly. This would be a marriage certificate between Jeannie Holland and Baron Hera Polk. Not a contract, a certificate. Binding immediately. Ralt started writing with a quill pen on sheepskin. Ralt's handwriting was neat, a rare skill for a commoner. He finished the marriage certificate quickly. Hera checked it, then handed it to me through Ailey. I read it over, nodded, and said to seal it. I pulled my Baron's seal from my pouch, actually from my game inventory, signed my name, stamped it with red ink. Hera did the same with his family's crest, a yellow wave shield on red. 2 noble houses, both sealed. No royal approval needed. This document proved a legal marriage alliance between the Holland and Polk families. I rolled it up and stored it safely in my inventory. Then Heron nervously invited me to a banquet and mentioned he'd found some kind of treasure he wanted me to look at. I could tell he was hiding something, but my soldiers held every strategic position in his fort, so I figured the risk was low. I declined the banquet but agreed to see the treasure. He led the way toward a storehouse. We'd barely walked a few dozen steps when a crossbow bolt flew from a second-story window of a tall building to my left. "Watch out," Ailey shouted, diving in front of me. I hit the ground rolling without even looking. The bolt struck Ailey's shoulder plate, but his chain mail underneath stopped it from penetrating. "Kill them all. Spare nobody," I roared. I couldn't believe it. These people didn't even have armor-piercing bolts, and they tried to assassinate me? The crossbow turned out to be ancient and worn, barely half its proper power. That's why it couldn't punch through Ailey's armor. My soldiers became unleashed beasts. Ailey split a militiaman in half with his greatsword. The blacksmith uncle ran for his hammer, but took an arrow through the back that pierced his heart. He collapsed, blood foaming from his mouth. I sprinted out of the fort under guard. On my way out, I waved at the soldiers holding Rick. They understood immediately. A sword fell and Rick's head rolled across the ground. The slaughter lasted half an hour. The Polk family ceased to exist. Ailey dragged Ralt out alive, the only survivor. He was trembling so badly he couldn't stand, begging to serve me. I sent him with Ailey to verify every male Polk family member was dead. While waiting, I pulled out the marriage certificate. This document gave House Holland a weak claim over fearless territory. In the Eagle Kingdom's succession law, if a lord dies without sons, brothers, nephews, or acknowledged bastards, the wife's noble family can inherit. Having married my sister to Hera, even if Hera was now dead, gave me a legal foothold. It wouldn't be simple. I'd need to work the politics carefully, and Marquis Val's support would be crucial. When Ailey returned confirming all Polks were dead, I looked at Ralt, hesitated briefly, then gave Ailey a slight nod. The sword came down. Ralt's head fell. I couldn't leave a witness who knew the real story. Sild brought me the Polk family's Baron Seal and Lord's Coronet. I pocketed them both into my inventory. I gave clear orders: burn all bodies. Kill the prisoners captured at Rick's outpost too, no loose ends. Nobody speaks about the assassination attempt. The official story would be that bandits wiped out the Polk family and seized their fort, then we heroically recaptured it and killed the bandits. The truth didn't matter in a world without cameras or recordings. And since I held a weak claim on their territory, admitting I killed them would only complicate things. By afternoon, every body was ash. Remains were dumped in the western forest for scavengers to finish. I shared some of the loot with my guards and headed home, leaving the fort intact. I'd station Shelt's mercenaries there later as a placeholder. Hera's treasure turned out to be a lie. Nothing valuable in the entire camp. The assassination crossbow was so old and worn it was practically a toy. Pathetic from start to finish. We reached home just as dinner was being served. Perfect timing. I had mad roast dozens of wild chickens and rabbits to reward my soldiers. It was too late for sheep, but we'd captured about 20 oxen and several dozen sheep from the Polk estate. We could slaughter a couple tomorrow. Over dinner with Winnie's, roast deer leg and ribs, white bread with butter, and purple wild berries. I told her I needed her help tomorrow. We'd go south to the Fearless Territory site, and she'd use her guardian aura to clear any undead that might form from the dead bodies. I told her we'd wiped out a bandit camp, and I didn't want ghosts causing trouble at night. She didn't question the story. I wasn't ready to tell even my wife the full truth about the Polk family. What she didn't know couldn't hurt us. That night I checked my stats. I jumped to level 3. Wiping out the Polks gave me a massive experience boost, the biggest single gain I'd ever had. Killing and conquering really was the fast track to leveling up. I saved the new upgrade point for later. The deer meat made me restless that night. Winnie's paid the price. I was like a young bull until well past midnight. Next morning, I was up early practicing sword work while she slept in, exhausted. Breakfast was more deer plus yellowish white bread. Our good store-bought flour was gone, replaced by rough local wheat that couldn't be cleaned of impurities as well. Still decent, though without the daily meat portions, my diet wouldn't be much better than a middle-class family back on Earth. I called Yaman over. He'd found limestone in the northern hills, which was excellent news. I gave him his biggest assignment yet: build a rammed earth wall surrounding what would become Valor Town, at least 400 acres enclosed, with real defensive capability. He asked how many workers he'd get. I promised 500 serfs plus all stonemasons, builders, and carpenters. After the farming season ended, I'd add 500 more. And when the castle was finished, I'd make him an honorary knight. His eyes lit up. He dreamed of nobility, but thought his lack of combat skills made it impossible. Then I pulled him close and shared a secret technique. Mix thick rye porridge into the rammed earth along with the lime, sand, and clay he already knew about. He looked at me like I was crazy, wasting food on walls. But I told him it was a closely guarded recipe. The starch acts as a binding and hardening agent. Done right, the result approaches concrete in strength and can last a century or two. Ideally, I'd use glutinous rice, but this world doesn't have it. Rye has less of the right starch, but still plenty. Even if the walls weren't perfect, they'd serve well for 3 to 5 years as a transition before we could build proper stone walls. Though honestly, if the mix was done correctly, they might stand for generations. I gave him 4 months to complete it. He promised he wouldn't let me down.